Welcome to Moonlit Publishing.
Prologue. Sammi clutched her books like a shield, but paper cannot stop a predator. She moved through the halls like a ghost, hiding her pale eyes behind a curtain of hair, praying the world would simply forget she existed. She was a girl made of tragedy, counting down the seconds until her 17th birthday, the day fate promised to send a savior. But what happens when the one you're waiting for is the one you should fear most? The impact came out of nowhere. A wall of muscle slammed into her small frame, sending her flying. Gravity took over. The heavy thud of textbooks hitting the floor was followed by the sickening silence of her own fall. "Watch it." A voice like grinding gravel vibrated through the air. Sammi scrambled, hands trembling, sweat slicking her palms. She didn't dare look up at the mountain of a man looming over her. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Apologize to your future alpha, orphan." A female voice sliced through the tension, sharp and cruel. Sammi froze. In the world of wolves, you don't stand when you've sinned. You kneel. It is an ancient, crushing law. Stay down until the alpha grants you mercy. "I apologize, Alpha," she whispered to the floor tiles, her voice fragile. "It will not happen again." She waited for the words of forgiveness. They never came. Only a grunt of annoyance and the fading sound of mocking laughter as the entourage stepped over her. A single tear traced a hot path down her cheek. "Don't worry," the voice echoed in her mind. "Tomorrow is the big day. We will find our mate. He will love and protect us." Kieran. Her wolf. Her only friend since the rogues took everything else. "Here's hoping, Kieran," Sammi whispered back. She rose, wrapping her white puffy coat around her thin frame like armor against the bitter winter. Outside, the air bit at her skin, and her boots crunched rhythmically through the pure white snow. The next morning, the sun rose on her 17th birthday. "Don't worry," Kieran soothed as the school came into view. "He will protect us from the others." "I hope you're right," Sammi thought, the fear tasting metallic in her mouth. "I don't know what I'll do if he rejects me." She stepped into the lot, and then it hit her. The scent. Freshly squeezed limes. Cool, sharp mint. It was clean. Invigorating. It was him. It's him. It's our mate. Kieran howled with joy. A smile touched Sammy's lips, but before she could breathe, a growl tore through the air. A hand, thick with muscle, clamped onto her arm. The sparks were instant, electric, and undeniable. But he wasn't pulling her into an embrace. He was dragging her into the shadows of the forest. He released her abruptly, leaving her skin cold where his fire had been. He stood with his back to her, a statue of tension. "Why?" His deep voice was a blade. Sammi frowned. "Why? What?" He spun around. "Why you?" The scowl on his face wasn't love. It was hatred. "He won't," Kieran whimpered, the hope dying in her voice. "Look. At. Me." The command forced her chin up. She met the stone-cold gray eyes of the one person she feared most. "Alpha," she breathed, the word trembling. She bared her neck, the ultimate sign of submission, but the growl that rolled from his chest wasn't possessive. It was disgusted. "Pathetic," he spat. "I refuse to have such a weak mate. How could you lead this pack? You couldn't even protect your parents." The words were physical blows. Memories of blood and rogues flooded her vision. "No," Kieran screamed. "Please, don't," Sammi begged, a tear slipping free. For a heartbeat, regret flickered in his icy eyes. Then, the wall slammed back down. "I, future Alpha Gabriello Dawson of the River Red Pack. Please don't. Please. Under the witness of the moon goddess, reject you as my mate." The sentence landed like an executioner's axe. Sammi felt her soul fracture. Gabriello shoved her away as if she were diseased, and she hit the hard earth. For a second, there was only silence. Then, the scream tore from her throat, a raw, agonizing sound of a bond snapping in two. It was a pain worse than death. It was the sound of a soul being hollowed out. Gabriello turned his back. He paused only once, a shadow of sorrow crossing his face as he listened to her howl. But he shook his head and walked away. "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry," she whimpered after him, apologizing for the crime of being broken by him. He didn't look back. He didn't know that was the last time he would see her. Sammi didn't go back to school. She didn't go home. She simply vanished into the white winter mist, leaving no trace behind. Chapter 1. Howls cut through the thick, foggy air as frantic footsteps raced ahead of pounding wolf paws. The metallic scent of blood hung heavy, dripping from the arm of a young woman. She sprinted desperately through the dense forest, dodging trees and leaping over a fallen trunk. She stumbled slightly on the landing, giving the wolves behind her just enough time to close the gap. "Rogues," she growled under her breath, pushing herself faster. "Come on, come on, come on," she urged herself. Something hard slammed into her shoulder. She rolled across the ground, came up on her knees, and flipped her long brown hair out of her face. For Rogue stood before her, growling low, muscles coiled and ready to spring. One lunged. She launched herself into the air, clearing the wolf and drawing a blade from her boot in one fluid motion. She landed on its back and drove the knife deep. The wolf collapsed with a heavy thud and went still. She spun, dispatching the next two with swift, precise strikes. The last rogue bared its teeth and charged. She dropped low, rolling aside, but the wolf twisted midair, pinning her beneath its weight. Its jaws clamped hard into her shoulder. A sharp cry of pain tore from her throat. With the last of her strength, she plunged the blade into the wolf's heart. It went limp. She shoved the body off and staggered to her feet. "Damn it all," she muttered, pressing a hand to her bleeding shoulder. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side. Her once crisp white t-shirt was soaked crimson, both rogue blood and her own. Her black leather jacket hung in tatters. Her skinny black jeans were caked in mud and forest debris. She took unsteady steps in a random direction. Her vision blurred and swam from blood loss. She swayed like someone far past sober. More growls echoed through the trees. These were different, not rogue. Pack wolves. But which pack, she couldn't tell. The realization sharpened her senses just enough. "Oh, for crying out loud," she snapped, tilting her head back to glare at the moon. "Do you really have it in for me that much? Give me a break already." She braced herself. The wolves were close. A large gray wolf stepped forward from the shadows, teeth bared. Then a tall man emerged beside it, wearing only basketball shorts. His torso was powerfully built, abs and chest taut with tension, rippling with each controlled breath. His fists opened and closed slowly, channeling visible anger. "Who are you? And what business do you have in this territory, rogue?" he growled. She smirked through blood-smeared lips. "What pack is this?" she asked, voice calm despite the pain. "I ask the questions here," he barked, taking one threatening step forward. She didn't flinch. "I'll decide my business once I know who you are. But look at me, I'm in no shape to harm anyone right now." She lifted her hand from the wound and flicked a bloody finger toward it for emphasis. "These lands belong to Alpha Gabriello of the River Red Pack," he declared with pride. She flinched visibly. Her smirk faded, her eyes clouded for a moment. "I see," she murmured. "Then I have no business here." She turned to leave. "That's where you're wrong, rogue," he said evenly. "The only way you leave this territory now is in a body bag." She shook her head with a dry laugh and faced him again. "Not entirely true. I've done it before." "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, stepping closer, fists tightening until his knuckles whitened. "What's your name?" "You really don't remember me, Johann?" She laughed again, rolling her eyes at his stunned expression. The beta of the second largest pack stood speechless. "Take away the red lipstick and the blood," she said, a new spark lighting her brown eyes. "Add some brighter clothes, and then you get me." "Sammi," Johann whispered, stunned. The last time he'd seen her, she had been a timid girl with little confidence and no fighting skill. Now she stood before him, transformed, red lips bold and dark, dressed in leather, radiating a fierce, untouchable aura. Her brown hair was longer, fuller. Everything about her had changed. Bingo. We have a winner, she said with a short laugh that turned into a hiss of pain as she clutched her shoulder. After a moment to steady herself, she looked at him. Now, I think I'll be going. Wait. What happened to you? You just vanished. Oh, so the big bad alpha didn't tell you? She chuckled weakly, leaning against a nearby tree as blood loss continued to drain her strength. Tell us what? Johann growled. Oh, I don't know, just that he found his mate one morning and rejected her on the spot without a second thought. Her voice hardened at the memory. Tell me, how's the jerk doing? Still with Jesse. Johann didn't answer. His eyes glazed slightly, he was mind-linking. A powerful howl split the night, commanding and unmistakable. Time to go. Bye, she called, summoning a final surge of energy and bolting. Stop her. Do not let her escape, Alpha's orders. Johann shouted. She ran, but her pace faltered quickly. 2 days without food or sleep, combined with heavy blood loss, were catching up fast. She tripped and fell hard onto her wounded side, a sharp whimper escaping her lips. Her vision dimmed. Johann reached her in seconds, annoyance clear on his face. He reached out to touch her. She found one last burst of strength, her fist connected with his face as she rolled onto her stomach. Johann stumbled back, landing hard with a grunt. He clutched his bleeding nose, staring at her in surprise. Even weakened, she'd managed to break it. Don't touch me, she growled. Then darkness swallowed her completely, and she collapsed into unconsciousness. Chapter 2. Sammi's eyes felt like sandpaper as she slowly opened them. She blinked several times, trying to clear the blur from the dark room. Her legs felt heavy when she tried to move, only to discover they were held by something wrapped around her ankles. She jolted upright to look, iron clamps secured her wrists to chains. Glancing down, she saw she no longer wore a shirt. Instead, a large bandage covered her wounded shoulder and chest, leaving her stomach exposed to the cold, damp air. Hello, she called, her voice rough and scratchy. She coughed to ease the irritation in her throat. Footsteps stopped outside the large metal door. It opened slowly. 2 enormous, stocky men entered, their dark silhouettes moving to the foot of her bed. They stood motionless, watching her. Are you going to talk, or just stand there staring all night? Sammi huffed, irritation rising at their silent scrutiny. It's hard to believe that's really her, Johann said to his companion, who gave a slight nod. The room was too dim, and Sammi's vision hadn't fully cleared, making it difficult to distinguish faces. So, are you going to tell me who your almighty friend is, Johann? Sammi asked. She bent one knee and sat up straighter, tugging lightly against the restraints. Growls rumbled through the air at her casual address of the Pax Beta, but Sammi only laughed. What happened to you, Sammi? Johann asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. He wondered how the quiet, withdrawn girl had become this sharp, fearless woman. I grew up, she replied, her voice edged with a growl. Life isn't kind or gentle when you're a rogue. We can see that from your scars, Johann said with a low chuckle. He found her new attitude suited her far better. Too right. The lucky ones got the drop on me this time. But they won't manage it again. She shrugged, then hissed in pain as the movement pulled at her wounded shoulder. In truth, ambushes had become more frequent lately. You've been out for 2 days. You should have healed by now, Johann said, puzzled that her injury still looked so fresh. She didn't answer. She turned her head to stare at the wall. Yeah, she whispered. The room fell silent. The door opened again. One of the men left, leaving Johann and the other figure behind. You've changed, Sammi, the remaining man said softly, stepping closer. Sammi's back stiffened, every muscle tensed at the sound of his voice. My wolf wants to speak with yours, he continued gently. He knelt to her level. Moonlight from the small square window high on the wall fell across his features. Gabriello, Sammi growled, nostrils flaring in anger as he smirked. No, he can't speak to her. Okay, let me rephrase that. My wolf will speak with yours, Gabriello said, still smirking. She shook her head and looked away. He can't, she repeated. Her voice cracked faintly. Are you denying your alpha? He asked with a snarl, trying to force submission. Ex-alpha. Don't forget. And no. She kept her gaze on the floor. I can't deny what I don't have. What do you mean by don't have? Gabriello asked, confusion crossing his face. He inhaled quietly, catching the familiar, intoxicating scent of strawberries and chocolate he had missed so deeply. Beneath it lingered the faint salt of unshed tears. She was fighting to hold them back. That day, you rejected me, Sammi began. She paused as a sharp ache twisted through both their chests at the memory. I didn't just lose my mate. Since then, Kieran, my wolf, hasn't spoken to me. I've tried to reach her, but it's like she's gone. Like she's dead. Gabriello looked down, a dark scowl settling over his features. He had caused this. He had turned the gentle, kind girl into someone hardened and broken. Because of you, I only have myself in this godforsaken world, Sammi muttered. A single tear escaped and traced slowly down her cheek. Gabriello understood now why she hadn't recognized him by scent alone in the dim light, why her healing was so slow. Her wolf's absence explained it all. Your wolf, he whispered, watching her struggle to contain her emotions. This was his fault. If he hadn't rejected her, she might be happy safe, by his side. Perhaps even with a family of their own. Instead, she sat before him, wounded in ways that went far beyond the visible. Just leave, she said, voice cracking. He sighed deeply and stood. He reached to touch her cheek, but she jerked away as though his hand burned. Don't touch me. You have no right after what you've done, she snarled. He dropped his hand. She was right. He was surprised she tolerated his presence at all. I'll have someone bring you food, he said, opening the door. Don't bother, she replied, turning her face away. She couldn't bear to look at the man who had shattered what little life she had left. The door closed, leaving her alone in the darkness once more. By now, she had learned to accept the cold and the shadows as companions. She closed her eyes. Several tears slipped free as she drifted into a dreamless sleep. Gabriello. Son. Is it true? You found Samantha? Gabriello's father asked as he strode into his son's office. Gabriello sat at his desk, focused on paperwork. He didn't look up. Yes. Johann found her badly wounded near the border during patrol. We're holding her in the cells for safety. Why is she in a cell? She should be in the hospital, getting proper care. Zion protested. Gabriello shook his head, expression grim. She's there for her safety and ours. She's been away from the pack a long time. We don't know who she might be connected to. Until I'm certain she's no threat, she stays. Zion studied his son. He could see that Gabriello was thinking of the pack's well-being. He crossed the room and sat in one of the chairs opposite the desk. Gab, there's a rumor spreading through the pack house, Zion said. Gabriello kept writing. Dad, you know rumors are always flying around here. It's what they do. This one says Sammi was your mate. And that the reason she disappeared is that you rejected her. Gabriello's pen paused. How had word spread so quickly? Please tell me that isn't true. Tell me it's just gossip meant to make you look bad. Gabriello set the pen down and ran both hands through his long brown hair. His gray eyes lifted to meet his father's. Zion's face darkened with anger. It's true, Gabriello admitted quietly. I rejected her back then. Zion's nostrils flared. His fists clenched as he fought the urge to lash out. Do you even know what happens when a mate is rejected? He asked. Gabriello shook his head. Let me remind you. It takes 2 years of unrelenting agony before the wolf finally dies. Then the human follows within a week. The pain is beyond imagination. All the while, the one who did the rejecting walks away untouched. Zion's voice rose with every word until he was shouting. The suffering Sammi has endured just to survive this long is unimaginable. Once she's gone, you'll feel empty and helpless for the rest of your life. Gabriello looked as though the ground had vanished beneath him. How do you know this? He asked carefully. Zion stood and turned his back. My sister, your aunt. Her mate rejected her. I watched her suffer through torment I could do nothing to stop. It broke my heart. She said having family nearby made it bearable. He paused at the memory. But Sammi has been alone. No family. Now no mate. No wolf. Which makes it even worse, Gabriello murmured, staring at the desk. I'm surprised she hasn't. Zion looked at his son, seeing the devastation settling in. All because Gabriello had once cared more about his reputation than about the girl fate had chosen for him. I don't think I've ever been this disappointed in you, Gabriello. I thought I raised you better. Zion's voice was quiet, heavy with sorrow. Your mother and I are leaving. We're going to visit friends. I don't know when or if we'll be back. He walked to the door, then paused and turned. I thought we had raised you better than this. Zion left without another word. Gabriello buried his face in his hands. A deep, shuddering sigh escaped him. Tears stung his eyes. What have I done? He whispered, regret crashing over him like a wave. Chapter 3. Sammi, it's been 3 days, and you haven't eaten anything. Please, you have to eat something. Johann stood beside her, holding a food tray. The meal was simple, tomato soup, but it was likely more than she had been used to lately. I'm not hungry, Sammi replied flatly. Johann sighed and sat on the cold, damp floor, crossing his legs. The chill nipped at him, but he stayed. Look, Sammi, I want to apologize for how I treated you back in school. I know it must have been hard. Hard? Sammi interrupted with a deep, bitter chuckle. You have no idea what it feels like to have no one to depend on. No one to talk to. You had your wolf, didn't you? Johann asked, trying to offer some comfort. Sammi shook her head slowly. She disappeared the moment he rejected me. Her heart broke because the man who was supposed to love and protect us didn't want us. Johann fell silent, letting her words settle. I know how rejection works, she continued quietly. I have 6 months and 28 days until she dies completely. Then, a week later, I follow. Johann stared at her in stunned silence. It was clear he hadn't known the full consequences. When a mate is rejected, Sammi explained, it takes 2 full years of unrelenting pain and sorrow for the rejected wolf to fade away. Then the human side endures even more torment, losing half their soul. It doesn't take long after that before the human gives up too. All while the one who rejected them feels nothing. Johann's brow furrowed in anger and disbelief. Why would he do something like that? He growled, fury clear in his voice. Sammi gave a small, tired shrug. I guess even the moon goddess has it out for me. My life has been nothing but pain since my parents died. She rested her head against the cold cell wall and closed her eyes. A heavy silence fell between them, not awkward, not comfortable, just present. Look, Sammi, Johann said after a moment. I'll talk to Alpha Gabriello about getting you out of this cell. But first, I want you to eat some of this. Sammi remained quiet. Fine, she whispered eventually. She shifted painfully to take the warm bowl. She lifted the spoon to her lips and let the taste settle on her tongue. I'll also see about getting you some painkillers, Johann added. He stood and walked out, leaving her to finish the soup. He made his way back to the pack house and headed straight for Gabriello's office. 3 knocks, then a low voice called him in. Gabriello sat at his desk, but instead of a pen, he held a bottle of Scotch whiskey. Gab? Johann asked, concern lacing his voice as he approached. Gabriello lifted his head. His best friend's worried expression met his gaze. I think we should let Sammi out of the cells, Johann said, sinking into the chair opposite the desk. She's suffering down there, barely eating. She's not a threat to the pack. If she were, a rescue squad would already be at our borders. She's a rogue, Johann, Gabriello replied quietly, the words seeming to stick in his throat. Gabriello, she's in a lot of pain. Her mate rejected her, and she says she only has 6 months and 28 days left until her wolf dies. Gabriello buried his face deeper in his hands. I think we should let her spend whatever time she is left here in comfort, Johann continued. So we can be around to help her. Gabriello broke. Tears slipped down his cheeks, catching Johann completely off guard. Gab, are you okay? Johann asked, unsure how to respond to seeing his friend like this for the first time. This is all my fault, Gabriello cried, pressing his forehead to the edge of the desk. Wait, Are you saying what she told me at the border is true? That you're the one who rejected her? Yes, Gabriello admitted through sobs. Johann sighed and stood. He walked around the desk and pulled his friend into a careful embrace. Gabriello broke down completely, shoulders shaking. I made such a huge mistake, Johann. Even though I rejected her, I never forgave myself for it. And now that she's here, I feel everything from that day all over again. She was in so much pain. And it's all my fault. You'll never be able to make her forgive you, Johann said gently, pulling back. But you can start trying to make things right. Get her out of that cold cell. Put her in a warm room. Get her some painkillers. You're right, Gabriello said. He wiped his face and straightened his back. But all the rooms in the house are full. I don't even have any open on my floor. Then I guess you should give her your room, Johann suggested with a shrug. Unless you're okay with her sleeping near another wolf. Gabriello growled low at the thought. I may have rejected her, but I won't let her share space with anyone else while she's under this roof. Johann laughed softly at the contradiction in his friend's reaction. I'll go get her from the cells, Johann said. I'm sure the pack doctor can give her something for the pain and to help her heal. That'll buy you time to figure out a sleeping arrangement. He left the office and headed back toward the cells. As he walked, Johann thought about the old days. How they had all treated Sammi when she was younger. Back then, she had been quiet, taking every insult and shove without fighting back. Now, looking at her, he knew that the girl was gone. The woman in the cell was different, fierce, unyielding, dressed in leather with bold red lips. She would bite back now. Hard. Chapter 4. Sammi, I managed to get you out of here. But under one condition, you stay within the pack house. 3 warriors will tail you if you want to go outside. Johann stepped into the cell as he spoke. Sammi looked up at him through tired eyes and gave a small nod. At this point, she was simply relieved to escape the damp, cold space. Johann offered a soft smile and moved to her shackles. He unlocked them quickly. Sammi let out a quiet sigh as the metal fell away from her skin. She met his gaze with eyes that were dull yet still carried a spark of defiance. Thanks, she said simply. She pushed herself up weakly. Johann noticed her struggle and gently gripped her right arm to help her stand. You all right? He asked, concern clear in his voice. She gave a faint smile. I have bad days. They just seem to come more often now. She took a careful step forward, reaching for the wall to steady herself. Johann watched her, quietly wondering how she had managed those bad days alone in the wild. Where are we going? Sammi asked, already sounding short of breath. Johann remembered and pulled a folded shirt from his back pocket. First, to the pack doctor for some painkillers. He held the shirt out to her. Here, put this on. Sammi took the white shirt and slipped it over her head. It was far too big, falling well past her hips. As the fabric settled, the faint scent of fresh limes and mint filled her senses. She knew exactly whose shirt it was. Come on, Johann said, stepping to her side. You're exhausted. Before she could protest, he scooped her up in a bridal carry, holding her securely against his chest. She felt light as air in his arms as he carried her out of the cells and into the warm summer air. Where have you been? Johann asked curiously, keeping his eyes forward as he walked. Sammi looked up at him for a moment, then dropped her gaze to her hands with a gentle sigh. Here and there. Just getting by. How did you get that scar? His tone turned serious. Sammi smirked. I've got a lot of scars, Johann. All from rogues who don't know when to quit. She chuckled lightly. Johann cracked a small smile as they entered the pack house. A small part of me missed this place, Sammi admitted quietly, glancing around. She ignored the confused and hostile stares from pack members as they passed. They rounded a corner into a long hallway. 3 girls stood together, gossiping. Their eyes locked on Johann carrying Sammi, and their expressions soured. Who's the slut? One of them asked with a giggle, her friends joining in. Before Johann could respond, Sammi cut in. Slut? Look who's talking, sweet cheeks. She wriggled free of Johann's hold and stood shakily on her own feet. At least I can keep my legs closed for more than 10 minutes. She wrinkled her nose in clear disgust. Says the rogue clinging to our beta. The blonde shot back, glaring. Sammi turned fully to face her. The girl wore a shirt several sizes too small that barely covered anything, paired with the skimpiest shorts imaginable. Please. Everyone knows you're the pack's go-to. They all know those skinny orange sticks you call legs never stay shut, Sammi said with a smirk. The girl's face flushed with growing anger. How dare you speak to me like that? One day, I'll be Luna of this pack. You should show me some respect, you mongrel. She snarled. Sammi burst into laughter, clutching her stomach. Please. The only respect I had for you disappeared the second I saw your face. It went so far up your... Sammi laughed harder. I can't believe Gabriello's standards have dropped this low. Johann stood with arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he watched the exchange. You bitch, the blonde shrieked. Yup. That's me, Sammi said with a wink. That pushed the girl over the edge. She charged at Sammi, fury in her eyes. Johann tensed, ready to step in, but Sammi only smiled wider. She didn't move. She waited. Johann could see she was enjoying this. The old Sammi had hated conflict. This new Sammi clearly didn't. As the girl closed in, Sammi bent her knees slightly and drove a sharp punch into the blonde's stomach. The girl crumpled to the floor. Sammi quickly straddled her, gripping her throat just enough to hold her still. She leaned in close, barely an inch from the girl's face. I don't do petty fights. I fight for real. You're lucky I'm in pain right now. Because if I wasn't, Sammi growled low, moving to whisper in her ear as the girl struggled for breath. I'd spill your blood as I have with plenty of others who tried to hurt me. Don't forget, I'm a rogue now. Pack rules don't apply to me anymore. Sammi released her throat, stood, stretched her sore muscles, and chuckled as she walked away. I can't believe you just stood there, Beta Johann, the blonde yelled after him. You let a rogue manhandle your future Luna. Oh, Barbie, Johann said with mock sympathy as he stepped closer. The moment she stepped back onto our territory, you lost that title. He smirked and walked off, leaving her fuming. I'm telling Gab, she shouted, storming toward the Alpha's office. Johann chuckled to himself. She still didn't seem to grasp that she had never truly had a shot at Luna, not even before Sammi returned. Sleeping her way through half the pack didn't exactly qualify her. You still know your way around? Johann asked as he caught up to Sammi. Yeah. Hard to forget, she replied. She slowed to a stop and sighed. What you did back there, Johann began. Sammi raised an eyebrow at him. If you expect me to apologize, you can forget it, she said firmly. Johann smirked. You've changed a lot, haven't you? Sammi nodded. You haven't even seen the full new me yet. She flashed a wide, genuine smile. Can't wait, Johann replied with a grin of his own. He followed her toward the pack doctor's office. Chapter 5. Gabriello has said you'll need to stay in his room, Johann explained as he paused halfway up the stairs. There are no free rooms at the moment. What? Sammi stopped a few steps higher, turning to look at him. The top floor only has 2 wings, Gab's and mine, Johann said with a smirk before continuing upward. Sammi muttered under her breath as she followed close behind. Just as long as he keeps his hands to himself and sleeps on the floor, she hissed. Johann laughed softly and stopped at the top of the stairs. The wide, open living area felt effortlessly modern, creamy beige tones accented with rich brown wood. A cream leather sofa curved around a glass coffee table set on a fluffy white rug. Deep brown laminate flooring ran throughout, meeting cream walls beneath a crisp white ceiling. A large flat-screen TV hung above a gray stone fireplace, directly opposite the sofa. Tall windows lined the far wall, flooding the space with natural light. To the left is my wing, Johann said, pointing toward a closed wooden door across from the fireplace and TV. And to the right is Gab's, and now yours. He indicated the matching door on the right. Come on, I'll show you around. He placed a gentle hand on the small of her back and guided her forward. Johann opened the door to reveal a cream-colored hallway lined with dark wood skirting and soft cream carpet. Warm golden lighting illuminated the space. 3 dark wood doors stood along the corridor, one at the far end facing them, the other two opposite each other. On the left, Johann said, leading her to the first door and opening it, is Gab's office, gaming area, private living room, and kitchen. The room was a smaller version of the main living area, complete with a desk and comfortable seating. He closed the door and moved to the next. This is the bathroom. It connects to the bedroom. The warm cream and beige space featured tiled floors and walls. A spacious walk-in shower occupied the right corner near the door, while a large white jacuzzi tub sat against the expansive single window that dominated the far wall. A sink with a wide mirror stood to the left, and the toilet was positioned near the tub. Now, the bedroom, Johann said, guiding her to the final door. He stepped back and waited for her to open it. When she did, Sammi froze, stunned by the room's quiet elegance. For a man's space, it was surprisingly refined. Off-white carpet covered the floor. An old wooden chest sat at the foot of the massive California king bed, dressed in black and white patterned sheets and piled with an assortment of pillows. A crystal chandelier hung from the center of the ceiling, flanked by two large bedside lamps on matching tables. A flat-screen TV was mounted on the wall opposite the bed, above a set of drawers that held a single framed photograph. Tall windows along one side overlooked the forest behind the house. "It's beautiful," Sammi said softly, almost confused. "I was expecting something else. Something not like this." Johann laughed warmly. "Well, I'll leave you here." He nodded and turned toward the door. "Wait," Sammi called, hurrying after him. "Could you do me a huge favor?" "What is it?" Johann asked, smiling. "I need you to pick something up. Do you have a piece of paper or somewhere I can write an address?" Johann pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app, and handed it to her. She quickly typed in the location and passed it back. "What am I getting?" he asked, glancing at the address. "My bike. You took the keys when you found me." Johann nodded. "I'll head out now." He gave her a quick nod and left, closing the door behind him. Sammi smiled to herself and turned back to the room. She walked to the bed and sat on the edge. It had been so long since she had slept on anything softer than the ground. She kicked off her boots, lay back, curled into a tight ball, and drifted into a gentle, dreamless sleep. "Gab, Sammi asked me to pick something up for her out of town." "I won't be long," Johann said as he passed Gabriello on the stairs. Gabriello gave a quiet nod and continued upward toward the right wing. When he opened the door, the sweet scent of strawberries and chocolate wrapped around him. A small smile touched his lips. He moved quietly down the hallway and eased open the bedroom door. There she was, curled into a tight ball on his bed, fast asleep. Gabriello approached slowly and stood beside her, gazing down at her peaceful form. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice thick with regret. "I should never have hurt you the way I did." He brushed the backs of his fingers gently across her smooth cheek. The familiar tingles raced through him at the contact, drawing a soft smile to his lips. Sammi shifted slightly, leaning into his touch. A quiet, contented sound escaped her, and the corners of her mouth curved upward. Gabriello cupped her cheek fully, stroking his thumb over her pale skin. His gaze drifted to her blood-red lips, and memories flooded back. Sammi from years ago, wearing almost no makeup, dressed in soft pastels, always trying to fade into the background. Now she was transformed. Leather, tight jeans, confidence that radiated from every line of her body. "So beautiful," he murmured. He leaned down and pressed the lightest kiss to her forehead. Pain twisted his features as he thought of everything she had endured because of him. He straightened and turned toward the door. "Please, stay," Sammi whispered in her sleep, shifting to rest her head against the pillows. Gabriello froze. He knew he should leave, sleep on the sofa, give her space. But her quiet plea tugged at him too strongly to ignore. He hesitated only a moment before carefully climbing onto the bed beside her, keeping a respectful distance. It didn't last. Sammi instinctively moved closer, nestling her head against his chest and curling into his side, seeking warmth. The tingles intensified, flooding through him in waves unlike anything he had ever felt. Gabriello wrapped his strong arms around her and drew her gently closer. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling her sweet, addictive scent. For the first time in far too long, everything felt right. With Sammi safe in his arms, sleeping peacefully, his world felt complete. He drifted off beside her, wrapped in quiet contentment. Chapter 6. Sammi smiled in her sleep as gentle warmth spread through her body, accompanied by soft, pleasant sparks. She reached to pull the pillow she was hugging closer to her face, then froze. Pillows weren't this warm. They weren't hard. And they definitely didn't breathe. "What the hell?" she yelled, eyes flying open to find Gabriello right in front of her. She shoved hard against his bare chest and sent him tumbling off the bed. She rolled the opposite way and landed on her feet in a defensive stance. "What the?" Gabriello jolted awake, springing to his feet and scanning the room for danger. Sammi glared at him, a deep growl rumbling in her throat. "You mother," she started. "Do not speak to me like that," Gabriello warned, stepping forward, irritation flashing in his eyes. "I'll talk to you however I damn well please. No messed up alpha who rejected his mate gets to tell me what to do," she shouted. A growl tore from Gabriello's throat. "You will hold your tongue," he ordered, layering his voice with alpha command. Sammi didn't flinch. As a rogue, the words carried weight but held no compulsion over her. "Don't you dare use that tone on me," she snarled, pointing a finger at him like she was scolding a child. They circled the bed until they stood less than a foot apart. "You were once a member of this pack," Gabriello hissed, glaring down at her. His jaw clenched as he fought to contain his anger. "Therefore, you still belong to this pack. You will obey me." Sammi burst out laughing. "I was once a member," she mocked. "And no one owns me." "Once a member, always a member," he shot back. "You have to be kidding me." She calmed her laughter and fixed him with a crooked smirk. "Why would I obey or respect an alpha like you? I have more respect for that girl from yesterday." Gabriello's hand shot out, seizing her upper arm and yanking her toward him. The moment he touched her, everything ignited. Sammi reacted first. She grabbed his wrist, twisted it sharply, and forced his knees to buckle to prevent a break. She held the painful lock for a heartbeat before driving her free fist into his chest, sending him stumbling back. "I'm not the weak girl you rejected anymore, Gabriello," she yelled. "I've changed. I can beat you any day." She advanced. Gabriello swung at her face. She ducked under the blow and slammed her fist into his stomach, knocking the breath from him. He growled, caught her wrist, twisted it behind her back, and pinned her against the wall. "Trust me," he growled low in her ear, "you will lose." Shivers raced down her spine at the closeness. She snapped back to focus as he pressed her harder against the wall. "I only said I'd beat your ass," she hissed. "I never said anything about winning." She drove her head back into his face and stomped hard on his foot. He released her wrist with a grunt. She spun, launching a roundhouse kick toward his head. Gabriello ducked and swept her supporting leg out from under her. Sammi hit the floor hard. Before she could recover, Gabriello straddled her, pinning her hands above her head while his legs locked hers in place. He stared directly into her eyes. "Submit." The word echoed in her mind again and again. An alpha could force submission this way in combat, locking another wolf's thoughts on a single command, regardless of pack affiliation. "You will submit." Gabriello growled, his face inches from hers, eyes black with fury. "Like hell I will," Sammi snarled. She twisted her hips violently and rolled him off. Now, on top, she threw a punch toward his face. Gabriello recovered quickly. Sammi backed away as he rose. The rage in his eyes had shifted deeper, colder. For the first time, real fear flickered through her stomach. Her back hit the wall. She hadn't realized she was retreating. She swallowed hard, mouth dry, words failing her as he closed the distance. He stood toe-to-toe, towering over her, jaw clenched, breath hissing through his nose. Through the anger and fury in his gaze, something else burned, something raw and unmistakable. Before she could name it, Gabriello crashed his lips against hers. Sammi froze, eyes wide. She raised her hands to push him away, but he caught her wrists and pinned them to the wall beside her. Heat pooled low in her stomach. Her mind clouded as instinct took over. Gabriella released her wrists and gripped the backs of her knees, lifting her. Sammi's legs wrapped around his waist, her arms looped around his neck. Her body moved on its own, matching his rhythm as he pressed her harder against the wall. His right hand slid beneath the hem of her shirt, tracing the bare skin of her back and arching her closer. He carried her to the bed and lowered her gently, hovering above her. His hand moved to the hem of her shirt and tugged it up and off, leaving her in her sports bra. His gaze caught on the network of scars across her torso. On instinct, his fingers traced them lightly, trailing downward toward the waistband of her jeans. Sammi sighed at the tingles racing across her skin. Her back arched into his touch. Gabriello hooked his fingers under the waistband and began to ease the jeans down. A quiet groan escaped him. His lips found hers again for a brief, searing moment before trailing along her jaw. Sammi closed her eyes, tilting her head back with a soft sigh. His fingers worked the button of her jeans open. Then the memory of rejection slammed into her like ice water. Pain bloomed sharp and sudden in her abdomen. "Wait," she whispered. The pain intensified. She bit her lip to stifle a scream. Gabriello, lost in the moment, scraped his teeth lightly over the sensitive skin at her collarbone. Fire erupted through her stomach. "Gabriello," she cried out. He pulled back instantly, worry replacing desire. "Sammi? What's wrong?" "Sammi." She doubled forward, wrapping her arms around her middle as the pain became unbearable. Tears brimmed in her eyes. "Sammi, come on, speak to me," Gabriello pleaded. Her eyes rolled back. She went limp against the bed. "Sammi? Sammi, wake up!" Panic flooded his voice. He shook her shoulders, but she didn't stir. Without hesitation, Gabriello scooped her into his arms. He burst through the bedroom doors, splintering the frame, and raced down the stairs. "Someone get my Theta," he roared to the startled pack members. He rushed into the nearest medical room and laid Sammi on an empty bed. A man in plaid pajama pants and a white t-shirt hurried in, expression grave. "What happened?" Gregory asked, moving quickly to her side. He checked her pupils and vitals. "I don't know. 1 minute we were fighting, then we weren't. But during that, she just started screaming." "Gregory, what's happening?" Gregory took her wrist, glanced at the wall clock, and listened to the silence for a long moment. He began attaching leads to a heart monitor. "Where is her mate?" he asked. Gabriello struggled to speak. "She was my mate." Gregory paused, realization settling over him. "I see." He continued working, sticking pads to her skin and connecting wires. "Then there's nothing I can do." "This is." He looked at Gabriello with a mix of sympathy and fear. "What?" Gabriello demanded. "This is your fault. When a mate is rejected, the rejected wolf goes through withering. But if they begin to bond physically again, so what?" Gabriello asked, voice tight. "It speeds everything up tenfold." Sammi said she had 6 months left. Now, who knows? Gregory tore a long strip of pink paper from the monitor, printed with jagged lines, and left the room without another word. Gabriello gripped the footboard of the bed and bowed his head. "I just make everything worse," he whispered. "Every single time." The heart monitor beeped steadily, each sound a quiet reminder of the fragile rhythm keeping Sammi alive. Chapter 7. Why the hell isn't she awake? It's been a week. Gabriello shouted at his Theta, who kept his head slightly bowed. Gabriello hadn't left the room since carrying Sammi here. She lay pale and still, her signature blood-red lipstick long gone, leaving her lips a faint pink. The fierce, defiant woman who had appeared at their borders over a week ago was nowhere to be seen. In her place lay the fragile, innocent girl from high school all those years ago. "Gab. You know there's no way for him to know that." Johann tried to calm the furious alpha, whose body shook with barely contained rage. Gabriello released a deep growl that vibrated through the room until the heart monitor spiked sharply. Every head snapped toward Sammi. A breathing tube ran from her lungs to the ventilator beside the bed. Gregory hurried to her side and checked the equipment as the monitor jumped again. "She's waking up," he announced to Gabriello and Johann. They waited in tense silence. Gabriello moved to her bedside and took her right hand in his. His other hand cupped her cheek, thumb stroking gently over her pale skin. "Come on, Sammi. Wake up," he murmured, squeezing her hand softly. Silence stretched. Then her fingers twitched faintly in his grasp. "That's it. Come back to us," Gabriello said, voice thick with relief. Her eyelids fluttered. Pale blue eyes opened slowly and met his. For a moment, they simply stared. His filled with joy and quiet hope. "Good morning," he whispered. Sammi stirred, immediately aware of the tube down her throat. She began to struggle. Gregory gently gripped her shoulders. "Sammi, I'm going to remove the breathing tube. It'll be uncomfortable, but bear with me," he said calmly. She gave a small nod. Gregory carefully withdrew the tube. Sammi coughed harshly as it cleared her throat. "Holy shit," she rasped. The three men in the room let out soft chuckles. "That's a new one," Gregory said gently. "Most people ask where they are or what happened first." "Well, I ain't normal," Sammi replied, voice rough and scratchy. "That is very true, Luna." Gregory smiled. "I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Theta Gregory. Nice to meet you. But Gregory, I'm not your Luna." She glanced at him, then at Gabriello, whose gaze never left her face. "I never was," she added quietly. Gabriello felt the words like a fresh wound. Not because she hadn't become Luna, but because he had rejected her. "That may be so," Gregory said, turning to face her fully. "But to me, you are still my alpha's mate. Whether he accepts it or not, I still see you as my Luna." He looked between the beta and alpha. "If you gentlemen don't mind, I'd like to speak with Luna Sammi alone." Johann nodded and left quietly. Gabriello hesitated. Sammi met his eyes. "Go," she ordered. He sighed, but stood. "Fine. But I'll be right outside," he growled, then walked out and closed the door behind him. "How are you feeling?" Gregory asked. Sammi sank back into the pillow. "Like someone shoved a red-hot iron rod down my throat." Gregory chuckled and shook his head while jotting something on his clipboard. "That's normal after a week with a plastic tube in place." Sammi studied him properly for the first time. He looked no older than 25, with golden blonde hair and striking green eyes. Well-built, his sculpted arms and chest visible beneath a blue dress shirt and maroon tie, topped with a white doctor's coat. "Sammi, do you know what happened?" His tone turned serious. Her expression darkened. She nodded slowly. "Then you know that because of the physical contact, we can't predict how long the withering will take now," Gregory said. Silence answered him. Sammi only nodded again. Gregory sighed heavily and sat on the edge of her bed. "I did some reading. This has happened before. When it did, the rejected wolf had less than a month left." Sammi stared at the wall. "Look, Sammi," Gregory continued. "Gabriello was an idiot. But even after he rejected you, you are still the Luna of this pack. The moon goddess chose you for a reason. She knows you have what it takes." "Maybe she made a mistake," Sammi whispered into the heavy quiet. "Back then, I was too weak. Now I'm reckless. Out of control. Before I ended up here, I was drunk almost every night. Sometimes, harder stuff. Not soft things." She looked out the window through half-open blinds. Raindrops clung to the glass. "I'm a lost cause." Gregory's eyes softened with sympathy. He understood why she had turned to those escapes. "Gregory, I just need some time alone," she said quietly. He nodded, stood, and left, most likely to update Gabriello on her prognosis. Sammi exhaled slowly. Her gaze drifted to the far corner of the room. There sat a pile of her spare clothes. Johann must have found them on her bike. Then she looked at the door. She pushed herself up shakily, careful not to dislodge the heart monitor leads and trigger an alarm. She stretched across the bed, grabbed the clothes, and pulled them closer. She rifled through until her fingers closed around her bike keys. A small, tired smile touched her lips. She slipped out of the hospital gown and dressed as carefully as she could. Dark red low-neck t-shirt, skinny black jeans, biker boots laced tight. She tied her leather jacket around her waist and pocketed the keys. Paper. Pen, she muttered under her breath. She reached for the clipboard at the foot of the bed, tore off a blank sheet, and scribbled a quick note. She placed it on the pillow. Then she moved to the window. It opened easily. She looked down one floor. Below sat her bike, parked exactly where Johann must have left it after bringing it here. "Thanks, Johann," she whispered. She took a steadying breath, yanked the pulse oximeter off her finger, and launched herself out the window. The flatline alarm blared behind her. She heard footsteps rushing, voices shouting. A flicker of guilt twisted in her chest. She hadn't meant to make them think she had died, but she didn't stop. She hit the ground running, swung her leg over the bike, jammed the key into the ignition, and started the engine. The roar drowned out everything else. She sped off in the opposite direction from the pack house, not once looking back as it shrank in her mirrors until it was gone. Chapter 8. Someone called a crash cart, a voice yelled in the pack hospital as Gregory talked to Gabriello about what Sammi had told him. That was when the heart monitor went flat in Sammy's room, causing everyone to run to her room. But when they got in, everyone was baffled to find an empty bed. Gabriello pushed in and looked at the empty bed and then around the room. "Where is she?" Gabriello growled as Theta Gregory handed him the clipboard with a note scribbled on the paper. He read the few simple words on the white paper. "Gabriello, I'm sorry. Do not follow me. I may or may not come back. I cannot be around you anymore at this time. Sammi." Gabriello growled and launched the clipboard into the wall. Johann looked at it, grabbed the board, read the letter, and sighed just as they heard the growl of a motorbike. Gabriello rushed to the window and looked out, followed by Johann, to see a motorbike drive away with familiar brown hair flying behind. "God damn it. I lost her once, and now I have lost her again," Gabriello yelled as he jumped from the window. Johann quickly followed as Gabriello growled and shifted into his large, completely black wolf and ran off into the forest. Johann quickly followed suit to keep an eye on his alpha. Sammi continued to drive down the road, letting the wind drift through her hair. The feeling that she was running settled her inner mind as she thought of a place to go. Memories of her first time fleeing the pack surfaced. The month she found sanctuary before facing the real world returned to her thoughts. Fueled by this memory, she steered with new resolve. Sammi finally pulled off the highway and onto a dirt track. She pushed her bike slowly over the uneven road and deeper into the dense forest that only grew thicker. The sky had grown dark with dirty clouds as a misty rain settled in. She slowed her bike to a stop outside a wooden cabin that was covered in greenery and surrounded by appliances that were mostly handmade. The old wooden door opened, and an old salt and pepper-haired Native American man walked out. His smile widened when he saw Sammi slip off her bike, and Sammi smiled at him as well. "Sammi, Bazu." "Greetings," he called, placing a hand on his chest and bowing while moving his hand toward Sammi. "Bazu." "Grandfather, it is good to see you," Sammi said, copying his movements. "And how is my child?" he asked as he turned and walked to the campfire and began to get it ready to light. Even though there was rain, Grandfather had placed a shelter to shield the area from the rain. "That is why I am here, Grandfather. I feel I have lost my way, for I met with my past and came away defeated." Sammi spoke, crouching down across from Grandfather. "I see, but you have not lost your way. Your path has merely been hidden from your sight. Your job is to find it once again." Grandfather spoke as he set the fire and settled himself on a log chair. "Now tell me, child, what has brought you here?" "I was wounded badly in a battle with 4 rogues. I was found by my old pack and taken prisoner at first. But then Gabriello showed up, and everything seemed to change. As much as I felt the pull, I resented him for all the pain he caused." Sammi began the long tale of the past week and a bit, ending with the part about how her life expectancy had now dropped to a mere 3 weeks. "I see you have had quite the experience since the last time we met," he stated as they fell into silence. "Well, you are welcome here for as long as you need. Thank you, Sammi spoke as she watched the fire burn away. A calm and peaceful silence fell over them as the fire crackled and burned softly. An old Cherokee chief was teaching his grandson about life. Grandfather spoke over the fire to Sammi, who listened to his tale. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. Grandfather paused as he held onto a small twig in his left hand. The chief continued. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, self-doubt, and ego. Grandfather explained, handing another twig into his hand. The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. This same fight is going on inside you, and inside every other person, too. Grandfather continued as Sammi looked at either of the twigs in his hand. Which wolf will win? Sammi asked him as he smirked with a soft chuckle. The one you feed. That was all he said as he put the twigs into the fire and watched them burn. Sammi thought over his words and the old tale as the day turned into night. Grandfather walked over to the cabin and reappeared with a medium box in his hands. He walked over, took his seat once more, and placed the box onto the ground in front of the fire. To find your path, you must know how to find yourself. He spoke with a nod and opened the box. He lifted out a piece of folded cloth and placed it onto his lap. Unfolding the piece of blue cloth revealed an eagle feather. He reached down to a small clay bowl and lifted it into both his hands. He muttered a few words in a foreign language before pouring water into the bowl and then holding a small glass bottle full of a clear liquid. He poured a drop of the liquid into the bowl and put the small bottle away. Grandfather pulled out a branch from the fire as its tip burned and muttered words again before blowing the flame out, leaving it smoking with embers. He moved the smoke over the bowl, then under it while chanting. He then placed the stick back into the fire and picked up the feather. Grandfather placed the cloth into the box and stood up. He lifted the bowl to the sky in one hand and the feather in the other. Bringing them down, he walked over to Sammi and circled the eagle feather over her head. He handed her the bowl, from which she drank the water. Then he lifted the bowl to the sky and handed it back to Grandfather. Listen to the wind, it talks, Grandfather muttered in a chant to Sammi as she closed her eyes and listened deeply. Listen to the silence, it speaks. She continued to do as he said as she listened to the silence. Listen to your heart, it will guide you. He called out as everything fell into silence. Guide me to what? Sammi asked as Grandfather walked over and put everything away. What do you desire the most, my child? That was all he said as he turned his back and left, leaving Sammi alone with the fire and her thoughts. What was it she desired most? She then smiled, knowing what she desired the most. Sammi stood up and doused out the fire before rushing over to her bike and starting it up. She turned to the cabin and bowed for a few moments to pay respects. She jumped on her bike and drove off down the road toward what she desired most at that very moment. She desired a bar and a packet of cigarettes. Chapter 9. What kind of fucking town doesn't even have a bar? That's unfucking heard of. Sammi growled, dropping back onto her bike seat after yet another useless search. The engine roared to life. She peeled away from the dull, lifeless little place and headed for the next town over. She kept careful track of her distance from River Red territory. She couldn't risk going south, so she had to loop wide and keep pushing north. Less than 30 minutes later, she rolled into a bigger town and slowed right down, eyes scanning. Before she even spotted a regular bar, a square building lit up with violent strobe lights caught her attention. People milled outside in short dresses or casual jeans and tees. Heavy bass rolled through the street like thunder. Sammi smirked, pulled right up near the entrance where the line had formed, and cut the engine. Whistles and appreciative grins came from several of the guys waiting. Nice bike, one shouted. Sammi ran her fingers through her hair, pocketed her keys, and walked straight toward the door. She briefly noticed a man standing slightly back in the shadows, phone to his ear. His eyes flicked to her, widened in sudden panic, and he quickly looked away when she caught him staring. She shrugged it off. The bouncers barely glanced at her before waving her straight through. "Hey, how the hell does she get in before us?" a shrill voice complained loudly. Sammi laughed under her breath and pushed deeper inside. The music quickly became deafening. The bass thumped so hard it felt like it was beating inside her chest. She slipped through swaying, drunken bodies until she reached the glowing blue bar. The bartender, roughly her age, ginger hair, pretty green eyes, and an easy smirk, looked up and grinned. "Hello, beautiful," he drawled, leaning forward. Sammi mirrored the energy, leaning onto the counter with a slow smile. "What's the best you've got?" He leaned in closer until their faces were inches apart. "That would be the hicky-dicky cockshots." His eyes dropped blatantly to her lips before flicking back up. "One shot. Every single drink behind this bar." "Sounds perfect," Sammi said, voice low and teasing. He raised both brows. "Gotta warn you, no one has ever finished the full lineup." Sammi chuckled. "Wanna make it interesting? If I can't finish, you can pour water over my head. If I do," she let the pause hang. "You owe me a kiss." A slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. He extended his hand. "Deal." He immediately started lining up neon shot glasses, 3 different whiskeys, 4 vodkas, and 13 more bottles of brightly colored liquor. "You ready?" he asked. Sammi just smirked and nodded. She started knocking them back one after another. After the 10th, she paused, let out a loud burp, and rolled her shoulders. "Giving up already?" he teased. "Hell no." She slammed the last 10 in quick succession. The burn raced through her chest, and the pleasant buzz immediately started crawling into her brain. She dropped the final glass upside down with a decisive clink. The bartender burst out laughing and started clearing the empties. "Well, damn. First person in history to actually do it." "So what's your name?" he asked, leaning close again. "Sammi." "You." "Tomas." Sammi leaned in even closer. "Now, about that kiss." Tomas met her halfway. The kiss was soft, warm, pleasant. But the second his lips touched hers, her traitorous mind flashed straight to Gabriello, his mouth, his hands, the electric tingles that had raced over her skin. She pulled back first and flashed Tomas a quick wink. "Well," he started, still grinning. "Can I get a double vodka lemonade?" "No ice." Tomas nodded, mixed it fast in a tall plastic cup, and held it teasingly out of reach. "Come home with me," he said with a cocky smirk. "Maybe," Sammi replied. She snatched the drink, turned her back to him, and walked away, swaying her hips deliberately. She could hear Tomas's low, appreciative laugh behind her. She slipped onto the dance floor and let the bass take her. She jumped and moved with the beat, steadily working through her drink until the alcohol had firmly pushed her past tipsy. The strobe lights turned everything into flashes of color. The music drowned out the entire world. She drained the cup and headed back for another identical drink. The second she turned around with the fresh one in hand, a sickeningly familiar stench hit her nose. "Rogues." Sammi sighed, threw the drink back in one long swallow, and started moving toward the exit. They spotted her immediately and began pushing through the crowd. She wove through hot, sweaty bodies trying to lose them, until she slammed straight into a rock-hard chest. "Shit," she muttered, looking up. Familiar blue eyes stared down at her. "Gabriello." She tried to sidestep. His hand clamped around her upper arm and yanked her flush against his chest. His other arm locked around her waist, no room to move. "Now, why would you try to run from me?" His warm breath ghosted over her ear. Sammi's eyes tracked the rogues closing in. "Gabriello, not now," she struggled. His grip didn't budge. "Why's that?" His voice dropped into a dangerous, husky register. Anger bled through every syllable. "Duck," she said, locking eyes with him. He frowned. "God damn it, duck." She swept his legs out from under him. He dropped just as a rogue's boot sliced through the space where his head had been. Sammi slammed her open palm into the rogue's shin, blocking the kick cleanly. In the same breath, She spun and delivered a brutal roundhouse kick straight to the rogue's face. He flew backwards. 2 more leapt over their fallen friend and charged her. Sammi met them head-on. One swung. She dropped low, skidded under, popped up behind him, grabbed his head and smashed it into the floor. The club exploded into chaos. Screams. People running for the exits. The dance floor cleared in seconds. 2 more rogues attacked at once. Gabriello, run! Sammi yelled, blocking 2 simultaneous punches. A brutal kick slammed into her stomach, sending her crashing back into the wall. She grunted, shook it off, caught the next kick aimed at her face, twisted the leg, and yanked. The rogue crashed onto his back. She dropped 1 hard punch into his face, lights out. Another charge. She jogged forward, dropped low, tackled him around the hips, and flipped him over her back. The next one appeared right in front of her. Stomach punch. Head grab. Knee to the face. Unconscious. A fist flew at her cheek. She leaned back just enough. Caught the wrist. Twisted the arm behind his back. Forced it upward until the shoulder popped and cracked. Shoved his face into the floor. The dance floor was empty now, nothing but drifting smoke, sharp beams of strobe cutting through it, and music still pounding relentlessly. Gabriello watched as Sammi slowly straightened from the last unconscious body. He rose carefully, like he was afraid any sudden movement would make her bolt. He took 1 step toward her. Sammi turned and ran for the exit. Sammi, wait! Gabriello shouted, tearing after her. He was not letting her disappear again. Chapter 10. Sammi, please stop. Gabriello shouted as he chased after her. Sammi burst out of the nightclub and glanced at her bike. She shook her head, no way she was riding while under the influence. She sprinted past it and down the street. Golden streetlights cast long shadows as she spotted the dark line of forest ahead. A small smirk curved her lips. She zipped up her leather jacket and picked up speed. Sammi. The calls echoed behind her. Gabriello, Johann, and someone she couldn't quite make out. She broke through the tree line and vanished into the cover of the woods. The smile didn't last long. Footsteps grew louder behind her. Male wolves were almost always faster and stronger than females. She had to lose them, or they'd catch her soon. She leapt over a large rock, rolled on landing, and sprang back to her feet. Gabriello bounded up onto the rock and launched himself off, shifting midair. His massive black wolf landed with a heavy thud and tore after her. Great, she muttered. She slowed to a stop and turned her back to him. Gabriello's wolf skidded to a halt behind her, a deep warning growl rumbling through the silent forest. Johann and the other man emerged on either side of the wolf. Bones cracked and shifted. Gabriello returned to human form. Johann tossed him a pair of baggy shorts from a black rucksack. Sammi, just listen to me. Please, Gabriello said, voice thick with sorrow. Sammi sighed, ran a hand through her tangled brown hair, and slowly turned to face him. For the first time in a long while, Gabriello truly looked at her. Her skin was paler, her frame noticeably thinner. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. The toll of the withering was clear, she was fading. Speak, she said quietly. Gabriello nodded and took a careful step forward. I know every time you get near me, I end up hurting you. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, or for whatever time you have left. But please, give me a chance to fix what I broke. Just one chance. He placed a hand over his chest, tears glistening in his eyes. Sammi watched him closely as he closed the distance. She looked down, breathing heavily. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did, Gabriello. You hurt me in ways you can't even imagine. Her voice cracked. She lifted her gaze. Guilt and sorrow were etched deep in his eyes. A single tear slipped down his cheek as he bowed his head. But honestly, Sammi continued, meeting his gaze again. I'm tired of the rogue life. Gabriello's head snapped up. Hope flickered in his expression. You get one chance, she said firmly. But you have a long way to go. Don't expect forgiveness anytime soon. Gabriello nodded quickly and rushed forward, pulling her into a tight embrace. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent deeply. "Thank you, Sammi. You won't regret this," he whispered against her skin. "You won't regret this." Shivers raced down her spine at the warmth of his breath. She patted his back gently, letting herself sink into the embrace for a moment. "I hope not," she murmured. Johann cleared his throat awkwardly. He and the other man stood off to the side, looking anywhere but at the couple. "Can we go now?" Johann whined. Sammi chuckled and shook her head. Gabriello smiled, wrapped an arm around her waist, and pulled her close to his side. They started walking back toward the pack house. Pain bloomed suddenly in Sammy's head, sharp and numbing. She pressed a hand to her temple, trying to ease it. Her knees buckled. She clung tighter to Gabriello. "Sammi? What's wrong?" His voice was laced with worry. She sighed and let him pull her into his arms. "I'm dying, Gab," she whispered. His soft whimper brushed her ear. Without another word, he lifted her bridal style and cradled her against his chest. She felt awkward at first, but was too exhausted to protest. She relaxed into his warmth. "Get some rest," he murmured low. She nodded and closed her eyes. Then she remembered her bike. She reached into her back pocket. Gabriello gave her a confused look and pulled out the keys. She tossed them to Johann. Johann caught them with a grin. "Can two ride?" he asked. Sammi smirked. "Of course. But scratch it, and I'll kill you." Johann whooped like an excited kid and ran off, dragging the unnamed man along. Sammi chuckled at their antics and looked up at Gabriello, who was smirking down at her. "How are we getting back?" she asked. "I brought my Jeep. It's just outside the forest," he said proudly. She shook her head with a small giggle. Such a boy. They fell into comfortable silence as Gabriello carried her toward the edge of the trees. It didn't take long. He stepped out onto the road where a deep red open-top Jeep waited. He walked to the passenger side, lowered her gently onto the seat, then jogged around and slid behind the wheel. The engine rumbled to life. "How did you find me?" Sammi asked as he pulled onto the road. "One of my warriors was out with friends. He recognized you going into the club and called me." Sammi nodded. So the man on the phone had been one of Gabriello's men. "So I'll be, staying in." A blush crept up her neck. Gabriello let out a soft chuckle. Yes. He knew exactly what she meant, his room. "Now sleep," he said gently. "I'll wake you when we're back." She closed her eyes. A moment later, she felt his hand settle on her thigh, warm, firm, yet careful. He gave a gentle squeeze. Sammi let out a quiet breath and drifted off to sleep. Chapter 11. Sammi woke to soft morning light filtering into the room. Her body was wrapped in something warm and solid. She blinked slowly and realized Gabriello was still asleep, his arms locked securely around her waist. She sighed and tried to wriggle free from his iron grip. He only pulled her closer against his bare chest. She poked his pectoral several times with her finger. "Gab, Gab," she whispered, keeping her voice gentle. He didn't stir. Sammi exhaled dramatically. "God damn it, Gab. Let me go before I piss the fucking bed." Gabriello jolted awake with a start, nearly launching himself off the mattress. Sammi burst out laughing, rolled free, and bolted for the connecting bathroom door while Gabriello grumbled under his breath and flopped back onto the bed. He rearranged the pillows so he could sit propped against the headboard, grabbed the remote, and flicked on the large TV opposite them, idly channel surfing. Sammi emerged a few minutes later, gathering her hair into a high ponytail as she walked over and dropped onto the rumpled covers halfway down the bed. She leaned back on her elbows and glanced at the screen. "What are you gonna watch?" she asked, relaxing into the mattress. "Don't know yet." "Was thinking a movie," Gabriello answered, voice still thick with sleep. Sammi nodded and scooted backwards until she was sitting beside him in the same upright position. "Stop. Go back, that one," she shouted suddenly. Gabriello paused on a channel showing The Hobbit, an unexpected journey. He turned his head slowly, one eyebrow raised. Sammi met his look with an identical arched brow. "What?" she asked, genuinely confused. "You like The Hobbit?" Sammi broke into a wide, genuine grin and nodded enthusiastically. Hell yeah! I love everything J.R.R. Tolkien ever wrote. Here, check this out. She rolled onto her right side, grabbed the hem of the oversized white shirt she was wearing, and lifted it just enough to reveal a small tattoo no bigger than an egg on her ribcage. The letters JRT were artfully intertwined, encircled by a delicate oval dotted with tiny stars. Gabriello's gaze softened. He reached out and gently traced the ink with his fingertips. Do you have any others? He asked quietly. Sammi nodded and lifted the shirt higher, turning slightly to show her left shoulder blade. A large cherry blossom branch curved gracefully across her skin, starting near her chest and sweeping upward toward the base of her neck. For black sparrows flew in graceful arcs around the branches, as though preparing to land among the scattered pink blossoms. Gabriello's fingers followed the line of the branch, reverent. Sammi shivered under his touch. It's beautiful, he murmured. I've been wanting to extend the branch down to my hip, she said softly. Haven't been able to afford it. Gabriello smiled, small and warm. Then let me pay for it. If you want it done, you should have it done. Sammi pulled the shirt back down and turned to face him fully. Really? He smirked, cupped the cheek that wasn't pressed to the pillow. Yup. In fact, let's go now. He vaulted off the bed, yanked open a drawer, and started dressing at lightning speed. Sammi laughed and followed suit, pulling on her own clothes. They moved through the bathroom together, brushing teeth, washing faces. Sammi quickly applied her makeup, thick black winged eyeliner, a light flush on her cheeks, and her signature blood-red lipstick sealed with clear gloss. The moment she stepped out, Gabriello grinned. Let's go, princess. Before she could protest, he scooped her up, threw her over his shoulder fireman style, and bolted down the stairs. Gab. Oh my fucking god. She squealed, half laughing, half yelling as he sprinted through the house. Pack members stopped and stared, some smiling with genuine happiness, others openly shocked or disgusted. Gabriello didn't slow down. He burst through the front door, jogged to his open-top Jeep, and deposited Sammi gently into the passenger seat. She rolled her eyes as he raced around to the driver's side, jumped in, fired up the engine, and peeled out of the driveway with a spray of gravel. He drove fast, grinning like a kid the entire way to the nearest tattoo parlor. He slowed only long enough to whip into a parking spot directly in front. The brakes squealed. Come on, he called, already out of the Jeep and waiting for her. They walked inside hand in hand. The walls were covered floor to ceiling with flash sheets and photographs of finished work. A heavily muscled man covered head to toe in ink approached them. Alpha, didn't expect to see you here. What can I do for you? He nodded politely at Sammi. Jake, Gabriello greeted. My mate wants her tattoo extended, and I'd like to start one. Sammy's eyebrows shot up. She looked at Gabriello in open surprise. Wonderful. Alpha, you can browse the books for what you'd like. One small thing, since we don't have a female artist on today, may I touch the Luna to work on her piece? Gabriello hesitated for half a second. Sammi shot him a sharp glare. He nodded. Perfect. Jake turned to Sammi. So, what are we extending? Sammi shrugged off her leather jacket, lifted the hem of her blood-red shirt, and showed him the cherry blossom branch curving across her back and shoulder. Jake nodded appreciatively. Straightforward enough. Gabriello stepped over with a large reference book and pointed to a massive, intricate design that would easily cover half his back. We can absolutely do that for you, Alpha. Jake turned toward the back of the shop. Hammond, got a customer for you. A lean, tattooed man, dressed almost identically to Sammi in black jeans and a band tee walked out. Alpha, pleasure to see you. He gave a small bow, then glanced at Jake. You'll take Alpha Gabriello, Jake instructed. I'll handle his mate. He looked at Sammi expectantly. Sammi, she supplied. Luna's Sammi, Jake finished smoothly. He led them to two large reclining chairs positioned side by side. Sammi and Gabriello stripped off their shirts and settled in, lying on their sides facing each other. Sammi lifted her arm to expose the branch. Gabriello did the same for his back. The buzz of the machine started almost immediately. For the entire session, they watched each other, smiling, quiet, content, while the needles traced new stories into their skin. Chapter 12. What else do you want to do today? Gabriello asked as they stepped out of the tattoo parlor and headed toward his Jeep. Sammi thought for a second. I'm hungry. Something to eat. Gabriello nodded, already starting the engine. What do you fancy? Cheeseburger. Sammi called out immediately. He chuckled and pulled away from the curb, turning toward the nearest diner that served them. He parked in the small lot. Sammi didn't wait. She hopped out and jogged toward the entrance. Gabriello locked the Jeep and jogged after her, catching up just in time to scoop her up by the waist from behind and spin her around. Both of them laughed freely as he set her back on her feet and kept her close, one hand resting gently on the small of her back as they walked inside. Table for two, please, Sammi said brightly to the waitress. The woman grabbed 2 menus and led them to a quiet corner booth. Gabriello pulled out Sammy's chair. She gave him a small, genuine smile and sat. He slid in opposite her, and they both opened the menus. Okay, what can I get you to drink? The waitress asked, pen poised. Diet Cola, please, Sammi said with a smile. Regular cola, Gabriello added without looking up from the menu. The waitress nodded and left. Sammi immediately kicked him lightly under the table. Gabriello winced and looked up, scowling. What? Be polite, she hissed, eyes narrowing. He smiled despite himself and went back to the menu. What are you having? He asked. Sammi closed her menu with a decisive snap. Cheeseburger and chips. Gabriello burst out laughing. Wait, cheeseburger and chips? That's it. She grinned and joined in the laughter. The waitress returned with their drinks and set them down. Okay, what can I get you to eat? 2 cheeseburgers and chips, please, Gabriello ordered, gathering both menus and handing them over. The waitress left again. Sammi looked down at her hands, suddenly quieter. I want to ask, my old house. Is it still there? Yes, Gabriello answered gently. No one has touched it. Why? She lifted her gaze to his. Gabriello kept his eyes on hers. My father was good friends with your parents. When you disappeared, he started searching for you. He told everyone your house was off limits. Anyone caught inside would be punished. Sammi listened in silence. He always believed you'd come back, Gabriello continued. But he didn't know why you left until you reappeared. How did he take it? She asked quietly. Gabriello looked down at the table. He hasn't spoken to me or looked at me since. Heavy silence settled between them. Sammi toyed with her fork and knife, the clink of metal the only sound. Gabriello finally broke it. So, what did you do after you left? Sammi exhaled slowly. For 3 days, I wandered the forests. I couldn't talk to Kieran anymore. I just walked, waiting to die. Then I stumbled across a wooden cabin deep in the woods. An old Native American man came out and offered me shelter and food. The waitress arrived with their plates and set them down before slipping away again. I told him everything, Sammi continued. He took me in, taught me how to defend myself. I stayed with him for almost 6 months. When I left, he gave me a stack of money he'd saved over 5 months. I didn't want to take it, but he said I needed it more than he did. She paused to take a bite of her burger. Gabriello listened without interrupting. I traveled for a while, she went on. But the depression got worse every day. I knew my time was running out. I started drinking every night until I couldn't stand. When that wasn't enough, I started smoking. Then, drugs. Her voice dropped to a whisper, shame threading through it. Gabriello's chest tightened with guilt. That's how I ended up like this, she said. I got into trouble with a rogue who sent his goons after me. I started wearing clothes made for running and fighting. Bought better weapons. My whole style changed. I couldn't be the gentle, kind girl anymore. I had to become badass. Gabriello finished with a small smirk. Sammi let out a short laugh. Yeah, I guess. She finished her burger and took a sip of her drink. I spent a year running and fighting rogues. Collected scars, tattoos, and this kick-ass attitude along the way. Until I accidentally stumbled back onto your territory. Gabriello paid the bill in silence. They walked out together. "You know," he said as they reached the Jeep, "I'm actually really glad you came back. Because now..." He turned her gently and pressed her back against the side of the Jeep, hands settling on her hips. "I get to make up for everything. And make sure you live the best life you possibly can." He leaned in until their foreheads touched. "Gab," Sammi closed her eyes. He laughed softly and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I know, princess." He opened the passenger door for her. She slid inside. He closed it gently, jogged around to the driver's side, and jumped in. "Hey," he said before starting the engine. "Do you want to see your old house?" Sammi looked down at her lap, fingers twisting together. She thought about it, really thought about walking back into the place where her parents had raised her, where everything had once felt safe. "Fuck it," she said quickly, as though afraid she'd change her mind. "Yeah, why not?" Gabriello nodded once, started the Jeep, and pulled out of the lot, heading toward the quiet street where her childhood home still waited. Chapter 13. Gabriello pulled his Jeep to a stop outside an old, unkept house. The front garden was overgrown with weeds and grass, and the house paint was chipped. The blue front door was bolted shut with a new lock that Sammi had not seen before. "You ready?" Gabriello asked gently of Sammi, who let out a deep breath and nodded. They opened their door and stepped out of the Jeep. Sammi walked around and stood in front of the waist-high gate. Gabriello moved around and placed a hand on the small of her back, rubbing small circles over her to calm her down. "You don't have to yet," Gabriello said, making sure this was what she wanted to do and did not feel she had to. Sammi took another deep, shaky breath and looked to Gabriello. "I have to do this," she whispered as Gabriello smiled softly at her and grabbed her hand into his own, giving it a tight squeeze before Sammi moved forward towards the front door. Gabriello reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of different-sized keys and flicked through them until he found the one he was looking for. He put the key into the lock and twisted to unbolt the door. He stepped back without opening the door and waited for Sammi to make her move. "Do you mind waiting here?" Sammi asked Gabriello, not looking from the door before her. "No problem. Call me if you need anything. Take your time." Gabriello whispered to her as she stepped forward, placed a hand on the golden metal handle, and pushed down to open the door. With a fair amount of effort, the door screamed as it was opened to a dark and dusty living room and a hallway. There was no light apart from the dulled daylight filtering through the closed curtains on every window. Sammi took a step inside, and the place felt dead and empty. She looked around the old, dusty living room that seemed to have no color or life held within it anymore. She looked down at the sofa chairs, and her memory flashed back to the time when she and her parents would play a board game every Wednesday night. She could remember their laughs as she would sulk for losing. The fireplace that once stood as the centerpiece was now ruined and falling apart. Sammi walked through to the kitchen and saw the same thing, little light and dust everywhere. Sammi remembers baking cakes and eating dinner on the center island every night with her mother and father. Tears welled up in her eyes as she remembered the past, but she kept them at bay as she left the kitchen and began to walk up the old wooden stairs. They groaned and complained under the new weight that they had not seen in over a year. Once at the top, she turned left and made her way to the one wooden door. Placing her hand onto the handle, she seemed to hesitate before opening it. She studied her breath and bit her lip as she pushed open the door. The room was still as she had left it that morning, a year and 6 months ago. Sammi's old bed was still made perfectly with soft purple sheets and 2 pillows. Her vanity desk, which stood at the opposite end to her right, was covered in a thick coat of gray dust along with her brush and a few pieces of accessories here and there. The 3 deep purple walls and 1 light gray wall, along with a light gray ceiling, were still the same color, but slightly faded with her cream-colored carpet. Sammi walked into the room and ran her hand over the dust-covered vanity desk, gaining a thick layer on the tip of her finger. Sammi then turned and left her room before heading towards her parents' old room. With her hand now on the handle of the door, Sammi took in a struggling breath before twisting the door handle. She stepped into the room, following behind the door with her eyes trained on the ground of the cream-colored carpet. Sammi lifted her eyes to see the dark wooden four-pillar bed standing proudly in the center of the room against the wall to her left. The coffee-colored sheets were made perfectly untouched, with the pillows a light, creamy coffee color. Sammi half expected her father to lift only his head up to look at her with his usual sleepy glance and grunt. She smirked softly as she carefully walked over to the dark wood vanity desk with an oval mirror, and around it, picture frames stood in their spots. The pictures were barely visible under the coating of thick dust. Recognizing the frame, Sammi picked one up and cleared the dust away from the glass. The picture brought a gentle smile to her face, and tears welled up in her eyes. She sank down onto the dark wooden seat with a coffee-colored pillow and held the picture frame in her hands with her elbows propped on her knees. The picture was of 3 figures, all smiling happily, with a happy birthday banner in the background. Sammi stood at the front of the picture, which was taken on her 16th birthday, her father standing to her right with a proud smile on his face and his back straight. His brown hair, much like her own, was short, but he had bright green eyes with a strong jawline and a small thin layer of stubble. His hand was placed on her shoulder, while the other was wrapped around Sammi's mother's waist. Sammi's mother had long curly locks of red hair that seemed to always sit perfectly without her even trying, accompanied by sparkling brown eyes that held so much love and cheer. Sammi placed her forefinger on the glass and moved it over her mother's face as tears fell from her eyes. Sammi then heard footsteps leading up to her as she quickly tried to wipe away the tears that only continued to fall. Gabriello appeared in the doorway with a somber look on his face as he walked over to her and stooped in front of the chair, dipping down to his knees so he was just smaller than Sammi, and he positioned himself in between her legs, taking the picture and looking at it with a soft smile. That was my 16th birthday. I did not really want a party, but they refused to say I had to. Sammi chuckled as Gabriello placed the picture back onto the vanity and moved his hands to cup her cheeks and wipe away her rolling tears. I miss them. I miss them so much. Sammi whispered as the tears struggled to be held back, and Gabriello made sure she was looking in his eyes. Baby, don't hold it in. I'm here for you. He whispered as Sammi looked to him before her face scrunched up and she began to cry her eyes out, leaning forward. Gabriello placed a soft kiss on her forehead before letting her head sink to his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her tightly as she gripped him tightly, sobbing into his neck. He pulled her off the chair and into his lap as they sat on the floor. He rocked back and forth while whispering sweet nothings into her ear. It did not take long for Sammi to drift into a calm yet stirred sleep in Gabriello's arms. Chapter 14. Gabriello carried Sammi back to the pack house and up the stairs to his bedroom. He laid her gently on the bed, pulling the covers over her sleeping form. For a long moment, he simply watched her peaceful now, the lines of pain that had etched her face earlier finally smoothed away. His chest ached with regret and something deeper. He forced himself to leave, heading downstairs to handle urgent pack business. But the entire time, his mind kept drifting back to her curled up in his sheets. He rushed through the necessary reports and orders, then returned to the room as quickly as he could. He moved quietly to the bedside. Sammi slept softly, her breathing even. Gabriello reached out and brushed the pad of his forefinger along the outer corner of her eye, trailing slowly over her cheekbone, then down to the corner of her mouth. He traced the curve of her lower lip until it parted slightly under the gentle pressure. A soft smirk curved his mouth, a quiet chuckle escaped him. He stripped off his shirt, trousers, and shoes, leaving only his boxers, and slid into bed beside her. He drew her small frame against him. Sammi shifted instinctively in her sleep, nestling her head on his firm, warm chest and resting her hand across the planes of his toned torso. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I never meant for you to go through any of this. If I had known then, I would never have rejected you. I was stupid, naive. He wrapped his arms more tightly around her upper body and pressed a lingering kiss to the crown of her head. Then why? The soft questions startled him. Sammi's voice was barely above a whisper, but it sliced straight through him. Gabriello exhaled heavily, searching for words that wouldn't come. Before he could answer, alarms shrieked across the packlands. Sharp, urgent, unmistakable. What the hell? Sammi bolted upright. Gabriello launched himself out of bed, yanking on clothes with frantic speed. The pack is under attack, he said, lacing his black combat boots. I need you to stay here. Sammi was already on her feet, glaring. What? No way in hell am I staying locked up while there's fighting out there. No, Gabriello's voice was iron. I'm not letting you go where you could get hurt, or worse. It's not happening. He scowled and moved toward the door. Sammi rushed after him. Like hell. You're the alpha of this pack, and I'm your mate, rejected or not. Gabriello turned, expression flat and unyielding. I'm sorry, Sammi, but I can't let you go out there. He placed both hands on her shoulders, leaned in, and kissed her forehead. Please forgive me for this, he whispered. For WH. His fingers found the precise pressure point at the base of her neck. She crumpled instantly. Gabriello caught her before she hit the floor, scooping her into his arms. He carried her back to the bed and laid her down carefully, arranging her head gently on the pillow. He brushed a strand of brown hair from her face, then leaned close. I love you. He breathed against her skin. He lingered a heartbeat longer, then turned and left the room, locking the door behind him. Outside, he closed his eyes, took a steadying breath, and clenched his fists. Shoulders squared, jaw set, he connected with his beta through the pack link. Johann, what's happening? Rogues charging the pack house. Code Blue is in effect. Gabriello bounded down the stairs 2 at a time. Everyone in position? Yes. First line is holding a mile out, strongest warriors, you, and third. Second line circles the house, beta, remaining warriors, and our best. Non-combatants and pups are secured inside. Good. I'm on my way. He burst through the front door and sprinted across the lawn. Just before reaching the tree line, he shifted. His large black wolf tore into the forest at a controlled run. He slowed beside his third in command. His wolf towered over every other in the line, massive, midnight black, radiating raw power. They're here, a tracker reported. Gabriello lifted his head. A rangy brown wolf padded forward, flanked by several others. He gave a sharp nod to his third, then ducked behind a thick trunk and shifted back. He retrieved a pair of basketball shorts stashed under the roots, pulled them on, and stepped out, muscles tensed, stance wide, every line of his body screaming dominance. Shift, he growled at the she-wolf clearly in command. She snarled but complied, rising naked with a smug, proud smirk. What is your business attacking my pack? Gabriello demanded, voice low and lethal. The woman laughed. A harsh, grating cackle. My sources say a certain she-wolf has taken refuge here. Gabriello felt the pack link hum with readiness. His warriors were coiled to strike. And why would you be after her? He asked. Even if she's here, she's under pack protection. We protect our own. That's exactly the problem, the woman hissed. That bitch killed 5 of my men and destroyed several of my supplies and merchandise. She's going to pay dearly. You will never touch her, Gabriello snarled. The woman laughed again, louder. Why so protective over that piece of trash? Then her eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. She's your mate. Gabriello's growl deepened. Perfect, she purred. If I kill you, the pain she'll feel will be worse than death. She shifted mid-sentence and lunged. Gabriello met her in wolf form. They rolled across the forest floor in a blur of teeth and claws. He threw her hard into a tree trunk. Around them, the lines clashed. Snarls, yelps, the wet sounds of combat filling the air. The she-wolf launched herself at him again. Gabriello sidestepped neatly, dodging the snap of her jaws. Meanwhile, inside the pack house, Sammi's eyes fluttered open. A small, sleepy smile curved her lips until memory crashed back. She shot upright, rushed to the door, and yanked at the handle. Locked. God damn it to hell, she roared, pounding her fists against the wood. You are so fucking dead, Gabriello. As soon as I get my hands on you, I'm gonna break every bone in that goddamn body of yours, you piece of shit. She stepped back, eyes narrowing as she studied the door. Then she backed up, squared her shoulders, and charged. The wood splintered under the force of her shoulder. She burst through and didn't slow down. She followed the faint trace of Gabriello's scent, fresh, angry, determined. You're so dead, Gabriello, she hissed under her breath, breaking into a full sprint toward the battle. Chapter 15. Sammi ran as fast as she could toward Gabriello's scent. Her boots hit the forest floor, the sound echoing as loudly as her heart pounded adrenaline through her veins. The forest blurred past in streaks, wind rushing by her ears, amplifying the roar of blood in her head. Her brown hair whipped wildly as she drew closer to the sounds of fighting ahead. She edged nearer to the clearing. Silence had fallen over the forest. Now she could make out two main figures. A low growl rumbled in her throat as she saw the rogue she-wolf holding a shotgun to Gabriello's head. They were both in human form. Gabriello was battered and bruised, kneeling before the smirking woman with a calm, almost content expression. His eyes were closed, as if he had accepted what was coming, that he would leave his pack without an alpha. Without slowing, Sammi launched herself forward. A meter away, she leapt into the air, driving her knee full force into the she-wolf's face. The impact sent the woman flying backwards. The shotgun clattered to the ground somewhere to the side. Sammi landed lightly, skidding to a crotch. She snapped her gaze up. The she-wolf sat up, pain replacing her smirk, blood trickling from her nose. Sammi growled again and charged. The she-wolf scrambled to her feet, wiping her bloody nose, bracing for the impact. Sammi's forearm slammed against her throat, pinning her back to a tree, while her other hand gripped the woman's collar. I should have known it was you, Ileona, Sammi snarled, pressing harder. You have no idea how long I've waited for you to face me yourself. I thought you were too cowardly to ever show up. Sammi smiled coldly and slid the hand from Ileona's collar, trailing a finger down her cheek. Ileona growled at the insult. Now, Sammi taunted, her tone mockingly gentle. You shouldn't have been so rude to your hosting pack. Ileona struggled against the iron grip. I guess I'll just have to teach you some manners, Sammi whispered. She smirked, drove a fist into Ileona's stomach, then stepped back. Ileona doubled over, clutching her midsection. Come on. Fight back, Sammi growled. Ileona lunged. Sammi caught the tackle easily, flipping her up and over her shoulder. She turned, waiting for Ileona to rise. Rule 1 in combat: never attack an opponent while they're down. That's it, Sammi said, grinning wide as Ileona charged again, swinging a wild punch. Sammi leaned back, letting the momentum spin Ileona around. Then she brought her foot up, slamming it into Ileona's back and sending her staggering forward. Rule 2. Tire out your opponent. And you're supposed to be the leader of the rogues? Sammi asked in disbelief, gesturing toward Gabriello. He was barely conscious, supported by his third-in-command. How did you even get an alpha in that state? Either he's not as good as I thought, Sammi continued, eyeing Ileona's heavy breathing and fierce glare, or you're just a weak coward who hides behind a wall of bigger fighters. Shut up. I'll kill you. Ileona roared and charged again. Rule 3. Blind your opponent with rage. They become predictable and easier to take down. Sammi laughed, caught Ileona's next punch, and twisted her arm sharply behind her back. Ileona faced away, arm pinned at an unnatural angle. She hissed in pain as Sammi slowly forced it higher. Oh, sweetheart, Sammi whispered in her ear, you underestimate me. With a rough shove upward, a sharp crack and pop echoed through the air. Ileona screamed, her arm going limp and useless at her side. Tears streamed down her face. She collapsed to her knees. Sammi gripped Ileona's shaggy brown hair and yanked her head back. And never ever do I want to see you pointing a shotgun at my mate's head again, Sammi hissed. A violent coughing fit seized her. Sammi released Ileona and staggered back, one hand pressed to her chest, the other covering her mouth. Warm liquid coated her palm. She turned her head and spat blood onto the forest floor. I overdid it, she whispered. Ileona had risen and was backing away with her followers. I'll be back, Ileona snarled. And you'll be sorry. Sammi wiped her mouth, only smearing the blood further. Yeah? Until next time then. Ileona turned and fled with her group. Sammi stood at the front, watching the rogues disappear from the territory, her back to the pack. Luna, Sammi? Are you all right? A worried voice called from behind. Gabriello had passed out and lay on the ground. Johann began walking toward her. Luna, the voice asked again. Sammi didn't answer. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed. The third in command rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. He looked down at her pale, blood-streaked face, worry etched in his eyes. Her breathing was shallow and uneven as she lay limp in his arms. Someone get Johann, he shouted. We need to get them both to the pack doctor now. The others nodded, lifting the alpha while he carried Sammi. They all raced toward the pack doctor. Chapter 16. Sammi slowly peeled her gritty eyes open, only to be blinded by the bright light of the room in which she lay. She hissed as a dull throbbing hit her head. A hand squeezed her right hand. Sammy's eyes flickered to it, then followed the arm to the person it belonged to. She saw Gabriello. Everything flashed back into her mind, the fighting, the coughing, Gabriello being unconscious. She scanned him over and found most of his injuries had healed, except for a few cuts and scrapes on his face. How long was I out? Sammi asked, pushing herself up into a sitting position. 2 days, Gabriello whispered, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. A saddened look rested on his face. Great. Another 2 days wasted of my ever-shortening life, Sammi whispered. A comfortable silence fell between them. Thank you. For saving my life, Gabriello muttered. He ran his thumb over her knuckles, keeping his eyes on their hands. Gab, look at me, Sammi whispered in a soft, quiet voice. She reached out with her left hand and gently turned his face toward her by the chin. Her hand traced his jawline and cupped his cheek, her thumb caressing the week-old stubble. You're my mate, rejected or not. I will always be there for you, Sammi said with a soft smile. Gabriello returned the small smile. I am so sorry for ever rejecting you. I know I may never fully make up for what I did, but I will make sure you have the best life you can imagine, and more, Gabriello said, leaning into the warmth of her hand as she nodded. Only on one condition, she replied, looking at him with unwavering resolve. Gabriello nodded for her to continue. Never knock me out again. I promise, princess, he whispered before leaning his forehead against hers. They both closed their eyes and savored the contact for a moment. Are you hungry? Gabriello asked gently. She nodded softly. He pulled away, and a rush of cold air swept between them. I will go and get you something, he whispered. He turned and walked to the door, then stopped and faced her again. No running away this time, Gabriello said with a playful smirk. Sammi rolled her eyes. No promises, she answered playfully. He chuckled and left the room. Sammi sighed and let her gaze fall from the door to her hands. Was she doing the right thing? Staying here and letting Gabriello care for her weakening state, even though he had the pack to lead, yet she knew she would not survive a day on her own. She was pulled from her thoughts when Gabriello opened the door and walked in with a tray of food. He smirked as he approached and placed the tray on her lap. Gabriello, I do not want to burden you. You are an alpha. You have a pack to take care of, Sammi whispered, looking down at her food and suddenly losing her appetite. Gabriello sighed and shifted to sit at her side. He cupped both her cheeks in his hands, guiding her eyes to his. Princess, you are not a burden to me. I have asked Johann to step up and help with my duties so I can have more time for you, he whispered. He placed a gentle kiss on her forehead and eased back to give her space to eat. Once Sammi had eaten as much as she could, which was not much in Gabriello's eyes, she shuffled to lie down on the bed. She glanced at Gabriello, who had moved to a chair. He let out a yawn, and she noticed the dark bags under his eyes. When did you last sleep? Sammi asked, scrunching her face. The night before the attack, he said simply. Sammi shook her head and shuffled to the side. She patted the bed for him to join her. He did so without hesitation. Gabriello removed his boots and shirt before lying down beside her. He wrapped his arms around her as she rested her head on his chest. "Gab, where are your parents?" "I have not seen them in a while," Sammi asked in a drowsy voice as she snuggled closer to his warmth. "When they heard about me rejecting you, they left on a holiday. I have not heard from them since," he muttered with a sigh. Sammi moved closer to offer comfort. "Get some sleep, princess," he said. That was enough for her to drift into a gentle sleep, listening to his heartbeat. Sammi awoke a few hours later, feeling content and warm. She hugged the warmth beside her tightly. A soft, happy sound escaped her lips as she stilled, letting the steady rise and fall beneath her continue. "Good morning, princess. How are you feeling now?" Gabriello asked, looking down at the half-asleep Sammi on his chest. "Better," she mumbled. Gabriello chuckled and rubbed his hand up and down her arm, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. A gentle silence settled over them before Gabriello spoke again. "Sammi, do you want to go out for dinner?" he asked in a hushed voice. "Like a date?" Sammi asked, raising an eyebrow. Gabriello avoided her gaze, a light pink blush tinting his cheeks. Sammi smiled at his reaction and let out a soft chuckle. "Then yes," she whispered. Gabriello's eyes snapped to hers, and a wide smile spread across his face. "Wonderful. Let's get you out of here and back to our room," Gabriello said. He shifted off the bed, leaving Sammi cold and pouting. He turned and caught her expression. "What?" he asked with a smirk. "I was comfy, and you ruined it," she whined. Gabriello chuckled and leaned down. He pressed a quick, gentle kiss to her lips before pulling away to avoid any further complications. Sammi's cheeks flushed red and pink. She squeaked quietly and hid under the covers. Gabriello laughed as he walked out of the room, promising he would be back in a minute. Chapter 17. Sammi growled lowly as she stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror fixed to the wall. A blood-red, loose-fitting skater dress clung lightly to her thin, pale frame, cinched at the waist with a belt only a few shades lighter. She stood glaring at the dress, wearing nothing else over it. Her hair fell in loose curls over her shoulders, and her makeup was done in her usual style, bold red lips and soft eyes. "Why are you growling at yourself?" "You look stunning," Gabriello said with a kind smile as he walked over. He stood behind her and rested his hands on her hips, drawing her gently back against him. "I'm in a dress," she said, more question than statement. Gabriello chuckled and tucked his face into the nape of her neck, her soft brown hair brushing against his skin. "Yes, and you look beautiful." Sammi sighed, her shoulders dropping. "And before you even ask, yes, you have to wear it." "Fine, but I get to wear whatever else I want," she bargained. Gabriello hummed thoughtfully, then nodded with a small smirk. "I can do that." Sammi slipped out of his hold and crossed to her usual clothes. She pulled on her black leather combat boots and her leather jacket, tugging her hair free from beneath the collar and settling the jacket properly on her shoulders. "You just went from beautiful to a whole new level," Gabriello said in a deep, husky voice. His eyes traced over her, taking in every detail. "Yeah, well, you had your chance," Sammi mumbled. She turned away and walked out of the room toward the main area shared by the Alpha and Beta. Johann stood in the center of the room, bowl of food in one hand and a spoonful halfway to his mouth. His eyes landed on Sammi. He choked, dropped the spoon back into the bowl, and covered his mouth. "Well," he coughed, smirking. Sammi shot him a sharp glare, daring him to continue. Johann immediately looked down, clearing his throat. Sammi smirked in return and headed for the stairs. "Tell Gab I'll be downstairs," she called, skipping down the steps and leaving Johann standing there, stunned. Gabriello appeared through the doorway, a frown creasing his face. He wore tight black jeans and a black button-up shirt, the top two buttons undone. He ran a frustrated hand through his messy brown hair and glanced at Johann. "She went downstairs," Johann said. Gabriello nodded in thanks. Both men bounded down the stairs. At the bottom, Gabriello found Sammi standing in the open doorway, gazing out with her back to him. He drew in a deep breath, smiled softly, and walked over. He slipped an arm around her waist, pulled her gently to his side, and guided her forward toward the jeep waiting at the bottom of the stone steps. Gabriello opened the passenger door. Sammi slipped inside. He circled the vehicle, climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away over the gravel driveway. "Where are we going?" Sammi asked, watching the houses pass by. Children played happily in front gardens while parents kept watch. The sight tugged at her heart, the knowledge that she would never see her own parents again in this life, and that she did not have enough time left to build a family of her own. She would never watch children take their first steps, hear their first words, or see them grow up surrounded by love. She would never have a husband to greet her with a kiss when he came home. "We're going to a new Italian place that just opened," Gabriello replied with a smile before returning his focus to the road. Sammi stayed quiet, lost in thoughts of the life she wanted but could never have. Before long, Gabriello eased the car to a stop outside a small, inviting restaurant. He opened Sammi's door and offered his hand. She took it and stepped out. He closed the door behind her and wrapped his arm around her waist again. "Do you have to keep me attached to your hip all the time?" Sammi asked, rolling her eyes. "Out in public?" "Yes." "I don't like it when other men stare at you," Gabriello said, a low growl edging his voice at the mere thought. Still, he knew he had no right to claim her so possessively after everything he had done. "Alphas," Sammi muttered, rolling her eyes again as she continued forward into the restaurant. "Table for two, please," Sammi said with a smile to the waiter. The waiter smirked down at her, a glint in his eyes. "Now, please," Gabriello said, his glare fixed on the man. The waiter's gaze darted to Gabriello. He shrank back, baring his neck in submission, then quickly grabbed the menus and led them to a table at the back. Sammi sat down. Gabriello gripped the waiter's upper arm firmly and leaned close to his ear. "Look at my mate like that again, and I will end you," he hissed, so low only the two of them could hear. "Understood, Alpha." "I'm sorry," the waiter whispered, eyes wide with fear. "I want another server for our table," Gabriello added, snatching the menus from the man's hand and sending him away. Sammi sighed and raised an eyebrow at Gabriello, clearly not thrilled with his reaction. "Jeez. You're getting more possessive, pal," she called as he dropped into his seat and handed her a menu. "I guess I am," Gabriello said with a smirk. Sammi opened the deep red menu. "Hello, my name is Mandina, and I will be your server today. What can I get you to drink?" The blonde spoke in a bright, pleasant voice. Her dirty blonde hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, her makeup soft and polished. She wore a black dress shirt, black formal trousers, and a black apron. "I'll have a Pinot Grigio, please," Gabriello said, then glanced at Sammi, who was studying the drinks section. "I'll have," she drew out the words. "The Hardy's Crest Red, please." "All right, I'll bring those right over," Mandina said with a smile and walked away. Gabriello looked at Sammi with an amused smirk. "What?" she asked, catching his expression. "Never pegged you for a red wine drinker," he said, shrugging. Sammi placed a hand over her chest in mock offense. "I will have you know, Gab, I am very well acquainted with red wine and whiskeys." Gabriello's smirk widened. "We'll just have to test that." Sammi nodded, eyes still fixed on the menu, refusing to look up. Chapter 18. Gabriello and Sammi enjoyed a delicious meal while chatting about small, light things. Gabriello smiled as they left the restaurant and walked toward his car. But when they reached it, he took Sammi's hand and led her past the vehicle. "Gab, where are we going?" Sammi asked, confused. Gabriello turned, scooped her up in a bridal carry, and held her close. "You'll see," he said with a smirk before taking off into the forest. Sammi clung tightly to his neck as the trees blurred past. "Gab," she called out as they raced up a steep hill. Suddenly, Gabriello skidded to a stop and looked down at her with a grin. Her face was buried in his neck. "Look," he whispered in her ear as he gently set her on her feet. Sammi sighed, then slowly turned around. Her breath caught. They stood on a cliff overlooking a vast landscape of rolling hills blanketed in trees. The sky blazed with the colors of the setting sun. Rich reds, warm oranges, deep purples, soft blues, and every shade in between. "Gab, it's beautiful," she whispered in awe, stepping forward toward the edge. A breeze lifted her long brown hair, sending it dancing around her. She closed her eyes and drew in a deep breath, savoring the rare feeling of freedom and peace, no need to stay constantly on guard. Arms slipped around her waist from behind, and Gabriello rested his head in the crook of her neck. He pulled her gently against his warm body and inhaled her fresh scent. They stood in quiet stillness as the sun slowly slipped behind the distant hills. "Thank you," Sammi whispered, eyes fixed on the view. Gabriello lifted his head to look at her. A gentle smile curved her lips, one he had not seen since before her parents passed years ago. "Why are you thanking me when this is all my fault?" he asked, confusion in his voice. Sammi eased slightly out of his embrace as the colors shifted into pure golden light. She turned to face him. The fading gold outlined her face and the bridge of her nose, leaving her eyes bright while the rest fell into soft shadow. Streaks of gold shimmered in her brown hair, and her eyes met his with pure gratitude. "You took me back in. You gave me a place to stay and the love I needed for the rest of my time. Whether or not you're responsible for how things are, thank you," she said with a small smirk before turning back to the sunset just as the last sliver disappeared. Gabriello stepped closer, placed his hands on her hips, and turned her to face him. Her brown eyes lifted to meet his blue ones. He raised his right hand and rested it gently on her left cheek, his thumb brushing softly beneath her eye. "You, Sammi, are worth every second of every minute," he whispered, looking deep into her eyes to show he meant every word and truly regretted all that had happened between them. Sammy's eyes welled up, but she smiled. Letting her heart lead instead of her head felt freeing. She rose onto her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. She knew it was a risk, but in that moment, she did not care. Gabriello kissed her back instantly, hungry yet careful, as though she might shatter. Tears slipped down both their cheeks, mingling as they kissed. They both understood that soon, this would be as far as they could ever go. Gabriello reluctantly drew back, eyes still closed, holding on to the moment. No arguments, no sharp words, just pure peace. "You are so strong," he whispered, soft tears still falling as his own walls finally came down. Sammi smiled gently and lifted her hands to cup his cheeks, wiping away his tears. "But now, I need you to be strong for me. I can't do it alone anymore." Gabriello nodded, drew a steadying breath, and straightened his posture. He looked past her with quiet determination. Sammi giggled softly and shook her head. "That doesn't mean I don't want to see this side of you," she whispered. "Even the strongest supports need help sometimes." "Wise words, princess," Gabriello murmured, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. The light had faded. Stars now claimed the sky, the moon reigning above them. No clouds marred the view as the stars twinkled under her watchful glow. "Come on, time to head back," Gabriello said. Sammi nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. He chuckled, lifted her into his arms again, and carried her through the forest. "I can barely smell your scent anymore. My eyes struggle in the dark. My strength is fading, and my speed is slipping away," Sammi whispered sadly against his neck, breathing in what little she could still catch of him. "I'm reaching the final stages. Kieran will be gone soon." Gabriello growled low in his throat, but kept moving. He reached the jeep, settled Sammi in the passenger seat, then climbed in and drove back to the pack house in silence. When they arrived, Gabriello parked, circled to her side, and lifted her into his arms again. He left the jeep where it was someone would handle it and carried her up to his room. Inside, he set her gently on the bed and carefully removed her leather jacket, draping it over a chair. He pulled a clean white shirt from his drawer and returned to her. He slipped off her combat boots, then eased the blood-red dress from her frame and helped her into his shirt. He kissed her forehead, then stripped down to his boxers and slid into bed beside her. He drew her close, tucking her head against his chest and wrapping his arms securely around her. "Gab, I've never said this before, but," Sammi whispered, half asleep yet still aware. "Gab, I'm scared. I'm so scared." She whimpered and pressed her face deeper into his chest. He rubbed her arms soothingly and kissed the top of her head, holding her tighter. "You don't have to be. I'm here and I always will be," he whispered. They drifted into a calm sleep, wrapped in each other's embrace. Chapter 19. 21 days left. "Has there been any news on Ilona?" Gabriello asked. He sat in his chair in the Alpha's office, speaking with Johann and 2 other warriors. Sammi rested on his lap, her head against his chest as she took a calm nap. Gabriello's right arm wrapped securely around her waist to keep her steady. "No. It's almost like she vanished completely. We've searched everywhere and found nothing," Johann replied in a displeased tone, seated across from Gabriello. "Keep looking. I want to know everything she does," Gabriello said evenly. Johann glanced at one of the warriors, who nodded and left with the other. After a moment of silence, Johann asked, "How is she?" Gabriello sighed, his gaze dropping to Sammi's sleeping form. "Getting worse. Her wolf scent is nearly gone, along with her strength," he said, pain threading through his voice. "I'm sorry, Gab. I really wish there was something I could do," Johann said softly, worry etched on his face. Another quiet pause settled over them. Both men watched the sleeping Luna as she gave a small shiver and curled closer into Gabriello. "Can you pass the blanket, please?" Gabriello asked, nodding toward the deep red blanket draped over the back of the sofa. Johann stood, retrieved it, unfolded it, and gently placed it over Sammi. Gabriello adjusted it to tuck her in properly. He brushed his hand over her forehead and pressed a soft kiss there. But something felt wrong. She had shivered, yet her skin burned beneath his touch. "Is everything all right?" "You look worried," Johann asked, concern sharpening his voice. Gabriello pressed his hand more firmly to her forehead. "She's boiling." He shifted in his seat. Johann stepped closer and felt for himself. Gabriello tilted her face gently. Her cheeks and skin had taken on a flushed, red tint. "She's running a fever," Johann whispered. Gabriello's eyes snapped up to meet Johann's, filled with fear and panic. "I'll get Gregory. You take her to your room," Johann said. Gabriello nodded and rose carefully with Sammi cradled in his arms, the blanket still wrapped around her. They left the office and parted ways, Gabriello heading right toward his room. He rested his chin lightly atop her head and drew her closer. "Don't worry, princess. I'm here, and you're going to be just fine," he whispered as he moved swiftly into the bedroom. He laid her gently on the bed, then covered her with layers of blankets to help her sweat out the fever. He had just finished when Gregory, the pack doctor, entered. "Alpha," Gregory said with a nod. Gabriello returned the nod and stepped aside. Gregory moved straight to Sammi, taking her temperature and checking her pulse, blood pressure, and other vitals. "Will she be all right?" Gabriello asked quietly once Gregory finished. "It's hard to say. With her condition, her immune system is weakening. Illnesses will become more common and harder to fight," Gregory explained, glancing worriedly at the Alpha and Beta. "But she'll be okay?" Johann asked in a small voice. Gregory sighed. "I have no idea. An illness you or I could shrug off might be far more serious for Luna Sammi, potentially life-threatening." Gabriello dropped his head into his hands with a heavy breath. "So you're saying she might not recover from this fever?" Johann asked, his voice cracking. "She's still some time away from the end," Gregory said carefully. "I believe she has enough strength left to fight this off. But it may take her longer to heal than it would anyone else." "What can we do?" Johann asked, stepping closer with a flicker of hope. "I'll set up a drip to keep her nourished and hydrated. She needs constant monitoring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until she's strong enough for me to clear her," Gregory said. He stood, gave a quick, respectful nod, and headed for the door. Johann looked at Gabriello, then at Sammi. We can take shifts watching her. You take the first watch. He placed a hand on Gabriello's shoulder and glanced at the large clock on the wall. It's 11:25 now. I'll be back at 4. That gives you time to eat and shower before you take over from me. Gabriello nodded, a small hopeful smile touching his lips. Sounds good to me. Johann gave a final nod and left. Gabriello took Sammi's hand and brushed his thumb gently over her knuckles. You've got to fight this, princess. I know you're strong enough, he whispered. He lifted her hand and kissed it softly. A knock sounded at the door. Come in, Gabriello called, knowing it was Gregory with the drip. Gregory entered and set to work quickly, inserting the line and adjusting the setup. You know, you've changed since Sammi came back, Gregory said as he worked. Gabriello glanced at him curiously. You think? In what way? You're easier to be around. Less threatening. You don't lose your temper as quickly, Gregory replied. If any of the lower ranks had spoken to him that way, Gabriello would have put them in their place. But Gregory had been part of the pack as long as he could remember, more like a second brother. Really? Gabriello asked quietly. Gregory finished the drip and turned, looking down at Sammi with a sad smile. She's been back a little over a week, and she's already changed you so much. Gabriello, promise me something, Gregory said, meeting his eyes directly. What? Gabriello asked. When the inevitable happens, Gregory stepped around the bed, leaned down, and pulled Gabriello into a tight embrace. Never lose the person Sammi has helped you become. Treasure it. That way, you'll always carry her with you in your heart. He released Gabriello and straightened. Without another word, he turned and walked to the door. I promise I'll try, Gabriello said, his voice breaking. Gregory opened the door and left in silence. Gabriello turned his gaze back to Sammi, a small, tender smile forming as he watched her flushed face in deep sleep. I promise I'll always try to keep you in my heart. No matter what, he whispered. Chapter 20. 19 days left. Good morning, princess. I brought you breakfast, Gabriello said with a smile as he entered, carrying a large tray in one hand. Sammi managed a weak smile and pushed herself up, resting her back against the headboard. Gabriello crossed to the bed, sat on the edge, and gently placed the tray on her lap. How are you feeling? He asked softly. Sammi glanced down. The tray held scrambled eggs and bacon, a glass of water, and a small vase with a single white rose tucked in the top right corner. Better, she whispered. She picked up the fork and knife and began eating slowly. Well, your appetite seems to be coming back, Gabriello said with a light chuckle. He leaned in and kissed the side of her head. Sammi smiled gently as she chewed a piece of bacon. Do you want to go out today? We could go to the cinema and watch a movie, Gabriello suggested, his smile soft. Sammy's eyes lit up with sudden excitement, a wide grin spreading across her face. Really? Can we go see Magic Mike? Gabriello let out a low growl, a protective flash crossing his eyes. No way. I'm not letting you watch basically naked men, he said firmly. Sammy's brows furrowed. She shot him a sharp glare. Why the hell not? Because you're mine, and you shouldn't want to see that kind of thing. Gabriello snapped. He stood and began pacing, running a hand through his hair and scratching the back of his head. I belong to no one, Sammi shot back. She set the tray aside and stood, wobbling slightly from weakness before steadying herself. She crossed to her freshly washed clothes, now carrying the sweet scent of strawberries and lilies, and began dressing. Where are you going? Gabriello asked as she brushed past him toward the door. To entertain myself. Thanks for the food, she muttered. She stepped out and closed the door behind her. Sammi walked a few steps down the hall and slipped into the bathroom, locking both the hallway and bedroom doors. She showered quickly, washing her hair and body, then dried off. She towel-dried her hair and twisted it into a high bun to keep it from dripping. She pulled on a white short-sleeved t-shirt and black skinny jeans, tucking the shirt into the high waist. She added black boot socks and glanced at the steamy mirror. Using Gabriello's toothbrush, Since he still hadn't gotten her one, she brushed her teeth, finished up, and stepped out into the main area. Johann lounged on the sofa, arms draped along the back, one leg crossed over the other, taking up plenty of space. "Hey, what are you watching?" Sammi asked, walking over and sitting beside him. Johann glanced at her and casually moved his arm from behind her head. Sammi rolled her eyes. She knew he did it to avoid any misunderstanding if Gabriello walked in. "Just the news. I like keeping up with the humans," he said with a chuckle. Sammi nodded as the headlines replayed. In the headlines today, the number of disappearances has risen to 11. Police have no leads and are urging people to stay indoors after dark, the reporter said in a calm, informative tone. "You've been tracking these disappearances?" Sammi asked. Johann nodded silently. "Do you know who's responsible?" He sighed, muted the TV, and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his face with both hands. "Yes, we do," he said quietly. "Well, who is it?" Johann hesitated, then muttered, "Vampires." Sammi stiffened, her jaw clenching tight. Johann noticed the shift and looked at her with concern. Her eyes had gone distant, glazed over as memories surfaced. Her expression hardened, and her breathing grew sharp. "I think I know which leech it is," she said, venom lacing her voice. She stood just as Gabriello entered, glaring at Johann. He had clearly overheard their conversation. "Sammi, what do you mean you know which leech it is?" Gabriello asked. Sammi stood by one of the large windows, arms crossed, hips cocked to the right. She drew a slow breath and lifted her chin slightly. "It was 7 months ago. I was on the northeast coastline, riding my bike along the road. I stopped at a small cafe for coffee. While I was drinking, 3 vampires walked in and scanned the place. Each one locked eyes with a human and approached. I watched them compel the humans to let them feed." She kept her gaze on the forest outside. The morning sun had only just risen, casting soft light through the trees. I wasn't about to sit there and watch 3 parasites feed. So I stood up deliberately. My chair scraped loudly across the floor, and the cafe went silent. I reached into my pocket. The vampires tensed as I pulled out money for the coffee and set it on the table. I turned to leave. She paused. "What happened?" Gabriello asked, fully drawn in. Just as I reached the door, one of them laughed loudly and said, "That's right. You leave now, tainted mutt." I stopped. The door swung shut behind me while I kept my back to them. Sammi turned to face the 2 men, who were now seated on the sofas, listening intently. They stood, left the humans, and approached me. The one who seemed to be in charge stepped right up behind me, leaned close to my ear, and whispered, "I think you should leave, pup." That was all it took. She sighed and sat in the single chair, meeting their eyes. I pulled out my knife and drove it into his stomach. The other 2 rushed me. I managed to break the legs off a table and drove one through each of their hearts. They turned gray and dissolved. I looked at their leader. He shouted, You filthy mongrel." I just smiled. I didn't say a word. I walked out. His last words followed me. Sammi leaned forward, sorrow filling her eyes as she looked directly at Gabriello. He said, "I will hunt you down. And I will personally rip your beating heart from your chest. But not before killing your mate in front of you. Only then will I rip you apart." I left, thinking it was just empty talk. She dropped her gaze to the floor and sighed. "And now that leech is back. I'm sorry." Silence settled over the room. "Sammi, look at me," Gabriello said gently. She lifted her eyes. He was kneeling in front of her now. "Whatever is coming, we will face it together. We will fight this, and we will win." Chapter 21. 18 days left. "Gab, I have to go somewhere," Sammi said as she walked into his office without knocking. Gabriello looked up from his paperwork, a stern glare on his face. "Before you say no, I want you to come with me," she added quickly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. After a moment of thought, he sighed. "Where to and how long?" he asked, his voice deep. Sammi walked over and leaned against the side of a chair near his desk. "We'll only be gone 2 days at most." She smirked, turned, and headed for the door. "Be ready in 10 minutes. We need to leave before dinner. Wait. Where are we going? Gabriello called. You'll find out when we get there, Sammi replied with another smirk before slipping out. She hurried down the stairs and toward the garage where her bike was kept. Reaching the white wooden door that led into the cold room, she scanned the rack of hooks to the right. Each set of keys had a name tag above it. She found hers hanging to the right of the set labeled Alpha. The tag above her keys read Luna. The word looked worn, as though someone had repeatedly traced it with a finger. You found your keys then, a voice said behind her. Sammi turned to see Johan standing there, hands in his pockets. He walked closer and glanced at the tags. You know, Gab runs his finger over the Luna tag every time he takes his keys, Johan said quietly. He does it slyly, thinking no one notices. But I do. Every time. Sammi sighed softly. Johan, does he regret it? She asked, meeting his eyes directly. He tells me he does, but I wonder if he's only saying it because I'm dying. You're his best friend. He tells you everything and doesn't lie to you. So tell me, does he regret rejecting me? Sammi, he told me the day he did it, Johan replied. I could see through his tough act. Rejecting you hurt him beyond belief. After you disappeared, he shut down. Became hard, distant, unable to connect like before. Every time I asked if he was all right, the pain in his eyes was clear. Tears stung Sammi's eyes. I can tell you this, Johan continued. It was the biggest mistake of his life. Not only does he suffer for it, but so does the pack. They live without a Luna now. I see, Sammi whispered, looking down. But in a way, this is my fault. Johan frowned. In what way? I wasn't strong enough, she murmured. She grabbed her keys and stepped through the door. As she started to close it, Johan spoke again. You are beyond strong enough. Sammi paused, but said nothing. She continued into the garage and walked to her bike parked in the center of the large space filled with expensive cars. She swung her leg over, sat down, inserted the key, and started the engine. It roared to life. She twisted the throttle a few times, lifted the stand, and rode out to the front of the house. Gabriello stood waiting, a backpack secured on his shoulders, a frown on his face. Get on, Sammi called. He shook his head. No, we're not taking that. We'll take my car. Sammi chuckled and shook her head. We can't. Where we're going, you can only reach by bike. Gabriello sighed, climbed on behind her, and wrapped his strong arms around her waist. You know, this should be the other way around, he whispered huskily into her right ear. Sammi revved the engine once, balanced the bike, and sped off down the driveway and onto the gravel road. She soon turned onto the main road and accelerated, pushing well past the speed limit. The wind whipped past them as she drove smoothly. Gabriello held her tightly, his thumbs tracing gentle circles over her stomach. He rested his head in the nape of her neck and breathed in her scent deeply. Hours passed before Sammi slowed and turned off onto a small side road. The forest thickened on both sides, and the paved surface gave way to a dirt path. So where exactly are we going? Gabriello asked, suspicion creeping into his voice as they ventured deeper. Do you remember when I told you about the time I was found just after I ran away? Sammi called over the wind. Yeah, you were found by a Native American, Gabriello replied. She nodded. Gabriello realized she was taking him to see the grandfather who had saved her life. 5 more minutes passed before Sammi pulled the bike to a stop and switched off the engine. Listen to me, Gabriello, she said as he climbed off. She followed and stood in front of him. Whatever grandfather says, do not argue with him. Gabriello frowned but followed as she walked swiftly toward a small wooden cabin. Grandfather, Sammi called. An elderly man in traditional Native American clothing stepped around the corner. Beads and feathers adorned his long, graying black hair, and colored paint marked his olive skin. My daughter, he said, placing a hand on his chest as Sammi did the same. They extended their hands toward each other with a respectful nod. How are you? Sammi asked, smiling. As fair as I can be, my child, his wise, aged voice answered. And who might this be? I see he is another child of the moon, grandfather said, nodding toward Gabriello. Sammi nodded. Grandfather approached with a small smile. Grandfather, I would like you to meet the Alpha of the Red River Pack. Alpha Gabriello, Sammi introduced. Grandfather's face hardened. The man who rejected you as his mate? His voice was firm. Sammi answered simply yes. Why did you bring him here? He is not welcome in my home, Grandfather growled, turning and walking away. Sammi gave Gabriello an apologetic glance before calling after him. Grandfather, please listen. Why would you bring the man who caused you this suffering to the only place you were safe? He scolded. Sammi sighed and clutched her head as a slow pain began to build. You must understand, Grandfather. I'm growing weaker every day. I can barely stay awake a full day or eat more than one meal. I asked Gabriello to come so that if something happened, he could take me home. She breathed heavily. Gabriello noticed and stepped closer. Sammi, he said softly, standing at her side. I came here to ask a favor, she continued. As the Alpha's mate, I'm a Luna. When a Luna dies, the pack begins to fall apart. I need to know if there's any way you can prevent that from happening to the pack. Grandfather looked at her thoughtfully. I may be able to help with that. Sammi drew a deep breath and let it out with a smile. Then her face drained of color and she leaned heavily against Gabriello's shoulder. I need to lie down, she cut off and went limp. Gabriello caught her before she hit the ground. Sammi, he asked urgently. Grandfather approached and examined her briefly. She is weakened by travel. With rest, she will be fine. Bring her inside and place her on the bed, he ordered. Gabriello bit back a retort at the man's tone, remembering Sammi's warning. He swallowed his pride and carried her carefully into the cabin. Chapter 22. 17 days left. Sammi stepped out of the cabin and walked past the fire pit. It was early morning. The sun had only just risen, sending golden rays filtering through the thick canopy above. Thin lines of light drifted through the air, catching and softly illuminating the dust motes floating around her. She continued past the tree line to a small, clear stream. At the edge, she crouched down, scooped up some water, took a drink, then washed her hands and gently splashed her face. Sammi? Gabriello's voice called from behind. She turned her head, stood, and offered a soft smile. The golden morning light caught in her brown hair, tinting the strands with warm gold. Good morning, Gabriello, she whispered. He walked up, placed his hands on her hips, and drew her close. Sammi rested her palms on his chest and leaned back slightly to look up at him. He lifted his right hand from her hip and cupped her cheek, a wide smile spreading across his face. Good morning, princess. How are you feeling? He asked gently, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Much better. And sorry about yesterday. I guess I overdid it, Sammi whispered. She rested the side of her head against his chest. His right hand moved from her cheek to cradle the back of her head, his left arm wrapped around her waist, holding her in a firm, protective embrace. It's all right. You don't need to apologize for something like that, Gabriello murmured, resting his cheek on the top of her head. They stood in quiet contentment, wrapped in each other's warmth in the middle of nowhere. Birds sang their morning songs, and the steady murmur of the stream provided a gentle backdrop. It's moments like these that I never want to end, Sammi said softly, pressing herself deeper into his hold. The peace and serenity of nature calms me and reminds me how beautiful the world truly is. I know, baby. I know, Gabriello whispered. He kissed the top of her head again before resting his cheek there once more. After a while, he shifted and swiftly lifted her into his arms. She let out a small, surprised yelp and wrapped her arms around his neck. Hungry? I'm sure Grandfather has started cooking, Gabriello said. Sammi's face soured. Really? She asked. He nodded. Why? What's wrong with that? Clearly you've never tried his cooking before, she muttered. Gabriello carried her back toward the fire pit, where Grandfather had kindled a small fire and set a pot above it. Just in time for breakfast, Grandfather said, ladling a thick, grayish liquid into 2 bowls. Gabriello set Sammi down gently on a log, then accepted the bowls with a nod. Thank you. He handed one to Sammi, who stared at the contents with visible unease. Wooden spoons rested beside the thick stew. Gabriello sat next to her, picked up his spoon, and lifted a portion to his mouth. The flavor was odd, neither pleasant nor entirely unpleasant. The meat inside was tender and easy to chew. "What is this?" he asked after swallowing. "Oh, it is raccoon stew," grandfather replied casually, eating steadily from his own bowl. He noticed Sammi merely poking at her food. "Sammi, are you not eating?" "No, I'm not hungry," she whispered. Grandfather nodded with a quiet sigh. Once Gabriello had reluctantly finished, each bite tasting worse than the last, he gathered the bowls and started toward the stream to wash them. Sammi stood quickly and took them from his hands before he could protest. She turned and walked off. "Alpha Gabriello, let us talk." "Come," grandfather said, turning away from the stream and starting down a small, worn path through the trees. Gabriello followed. "Sammi has changed since she met you again," grandfather began, hands clasped behind his back. "She is less vulgar, more gentle." He paused, then continued. "You have caused her unbelievable pain and struggle these past year and a half. I have seen her at her lowest. Several times, she nearly ended her own life. Once, she took a drug and overdosed. What you are doing now does not erase the fact that you are the one who caused this. You are the one who hurt your chosen one, the one you were meant to protect, care for, and love." Gabriello looked down, a heavy sigh escaping him. "I know very well it does not. I know there is no way I can fully make up for what I have done." His voice carried fresh sorrow at the revelation of her past attempts. "But I will do everything I can to make sure she enjoys the time she has left." "I am glad to hear that, Alpha Gabriello," grandfather replied. He stopped and turned to face him directly. "But listen closely. I am not doing what she asks you. I am doing it for her and for the Red River Pack." He resumed walking, leaving Gabriello standing alone. "And when Sammi has passed over to our forefathers, I do not want to see you here again." Grandfather disappeared down the path. Gabriello stood in silence for several minutes, turning over the weight of grandfather's words and the new knowledge of Sammi's unspoken pain. He made a quiet mental note to speak with her about it later. Then he turned and walked slowly back to the clearing. Sammi stood in the center, tying her hair into a ponytail. When she saw him, a bright smile spread across her face. She walked over. "It's time to head home," she said warmly. Gabriello's eyes lit up, a smirk tugging at his lips. "What?" Sammi asked, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. He stepped forward and wrapped her in a tight embrace. "You said home," he whispered softly. Sammi chuckled and hugged him back. Chapter 23. 14 days left. The past 3 days passed in a quiet blur as Gabriello and Sammi stole every moment they could together. Upon returning to the pack house, Sammi underwent a checkup and was given the all-clear, given her condition. Gabriello sat at his desk, focused on paperwork, while Sammi lay curled on one of the leather sofas, now fast asleep. A soft knock came before the door eased open, revealing Johan. "Alpha," he greeted quietly, mindful of Sammi. "Johan, sit. Any news?" Gabriello asked in a low voice. Johan took the seat across the desk. "Nothing. No trace of anything," he whispered, shaking his head. They let out matching sighs and sat in heavy silence for a moment. "I spoke with my father," Gabriello said quietly. "They're in Egypt with friends. I told them to stay longer until this blows over." His eyes drifted to Sammi. A faint, peaceful smile touched her lips, softening the delicate lines of her sleeping face. "She's getting weaker every day," Gabriello murmured, pain thick in his voice. "She hardly eats. Sleeps most of the time." "There's nothing more we can do except stay close," Johan replied gently. Gabriello stood, rounded the desk, and crouched beside Sammi. He brushed a fallen strand of brown hair from her face, where she lay on her side. "I wish I could undo it all," he whispered. "I want to give her the world." He leaned in and pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. The door flew open with a bang. Tomas, one of the pack warriors, stood in the frame, chest heaving, sweat slicking his terrified face. "Tomas? What's wrong?" Johan asked, rising quickly. Sammi jerked awake at the noise and looked toward Gabriello. They are, Tomas panted, fighting for air. They crossed the borders. They're here. Johann, rally the warriors, Gabriello ordered sharply. Tomas, move every woman and child to the safe room now. Both men nodded and bolted out. Gabriello turned to Sammi, who had pushed herself upright. He stepped close and cradled her face gently in his hands. This office is as secure as the safe room, maybe more so, he said, his eyes pleading. Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone except Johann or me. Don't leave. Promise me. Sammi's joy tightened. Fine. Her voice softened. But you have to promise me something. Anything, he answered instantly. She reached up and gently drew his forehead to rest against hers. Stay alive, she whispered. They lingered there, neither wanting to let go. Now go, she said quietly, pressing a kiss to his forehead and nudging him toward the door. The pack needs you. Gabriello gave a soft chuckle, opened the door, cast one final look at her, and stepped out, closing it behind him. Sammi exhaled slowly. She stood, smoothed her blood-red shirt, ensuring it was neatly tucked into her high-waisted black jeans, and tapped the toe of her right combat boot against the floor. She gathered her long hair, pulled it into a tight ponytail, and clicked her teeth. Sorry, Gab, she murmured under her breath. But you really should know better than to trust me. She cracked the door, scanned the empty corridor in both directions, and slipped out. Moving silently through the shadows, she hurried down the stairs to the garage. She lifted her keys from the hook, eased the door open, and closed it without a sound. She crossed to her bike and rested a hand on the seat. Luna? A tiny, trembling voice asked. Sammi stiffened, then turned. A little girl, no older than 5, stood clutching a teddy bear to her chest. Fear swam in her wide eyes, and her small body shook. Are you going to leave us? The girl asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. Sammi walked over and knelt in front of her. She rested a gentle hand on the child's shoulder, then wiped tears from her soft cheek. There's no way I would abandon any of you, she whispered with a small smile. Especially not when this is all because of me. What are you going to do? I'm going to end this, Sammi said quietly. Once and for all. She leaned forward and kissed the girl's forehead. Now go back to your mummy. Stay away from anyone you don't know. The girl nodded quickly and scampered off. Sammi opened the bike's storage compartment. A determined smirk crossed her lips as she pulled out several throwing knives and strapped them securely to her forearms. She retrieved 2 small daggers and slid them into her boots. Next, she lifted her belt, fitted with twin holsters for pistols and extra magazines clipped along its length, buckled it around her waist, closed the compartment, and set the keys on the seat. Time to finish this, she muttered. She pushed open the garage door and stepped into the pack garden, leaving it ajar. She walked straight toward the forest edge. Figures began to emerge from the trees, red eyes glowing in the dim light. Vamps. Perfect warm-up, Sammi said with a dark smirk. She drew both pistols and cocked them. Let's have it then, she hissed. The vampires surged forward with vicious hisses. Sammi aimed and fired in controlled bursts, dropping several before they could close in. One darted to flank her from the right. She spun and put 2 rounds into it. They were on her now, too close for guns. She holstered them, dropped low, and yanked the daggers from her boots. One in each hand, she moved through their onslaught, dodging claws, weaving between strikes, slicing and stabbing with precision. She grunted when a talon grazed her arm or side, but she pressed on, thinning their numbers. A deep, mocking voice sliced through the metallic tang of blood and her ragged breathing. Well, well, well. Sammi. How nice it is to see you again. Sammi sucked in air, already tiring far too quickly. She straightened as the vampire responsible stepped forward from the shadows. Nick, she hissed. Chapter 24. Nick, just the leech I've been hunting for, Sammi said with a smirk. She tightened her grip on her daggers and glared at him. Nick returned the smirk and walked forward slowly, his right hand tucked casually into the pocket of his formal trousers. He wore a dark gray suit with a crisp white shirt underneath, the top 2 buttons left open instead of a tie. His brown hair was styled, sleek, and perfect, and his glowing red eyes raked over Sammi from head to toe. Now. That's a bit harsh, don't you think? His smooth voice drifted through the thick air. Vampires were built to lure prey, striking features, an intoxicating scent, the power to bend minds, erase or implant memories. Their speed and agility could match any werewolf's. Not harsh enough, Sammi muttered. She drew in a steady breath and straightened her spine. Leave the pack alone. Now, why would I do that? Nick replied, gesturing lightly between them with his left hand. It's only fitting I kill a few of your friends, seeing as you killed a few of mine. Please. These people have done nothing but try to live. It's me you want. Sammi struck her chest once for emphasis. Nick tilted his head. I see. Tell you what. I'll give you a choice. His tone stayed calm and easy. We fight to the death. If you win, my followers leave your pack alone, and you can live out the rest of your life. He smirked. Sammi growled low. And if you win? She asked, needing the full cost. If I win, he said, each word laced with cruel pleasure, I kill every single wolf here. I start with the children right in front of their parents. Then I tear mates apart, killing the females while the males watch. I leave the males alive, their lives destroyed, their families ripped away. I watch them crumble from the inside until they no longer wish to live. Only then do I kill them slowly. Sammi swallowed hard. Fine. But if I win and kill you, your minions leave this pack alone forever. They never touch it again. Yes, Nick agreed smoothly. Sammi took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and dropped her gaze. Fie. Like hell you will, a deep, familiar voice roared behind her. Shit, Sammi muttered, rubbing her eyes with a groan. Piss off, Gabriello. In case you didn't notice, I'm trying to win freedom for you and the pack, she hissed. Gabriello stormed forward and planted himself in front of her, glaring down with furious blue eyes. Dirt and blood streaked his rough face. You said you'd stay inside, he snarled low. Really? And you believed me? Sammi shot back. I won't hide in that damn room while everyone else fights because of my mess. I want you to go back to my office. Right now. We'll talk about this later. Gabriello grabbed her upper arm and began pulling her away. Gabriello. Stop. Sammi yanked free. She looked down, then up at him with a sad, resolute expression. I'm sorry, Gabriello. But if it means you and everyone else stay safe, I'll give up the last days I have left. Happily. She lifted a hand to his dirt-streaked cheek. Please don't do this, Gabriello whispered. I can't let you go yet. I'm sorry, Gabriello, she said softly. Then louder, Nick. Sammi, please don't, Gabriello begged. She squeezed her eyes shut. I'm sorry, Gab. No. Don't, he pleaded, placing a hand on her shoulder. Let's do this, Sammi said, new determination hardening her face. Wonderful, Nick replied, motioning her forward. Sammi, stop, Gabriello begged as she stepped ahead. He reached to pull her back, but 2 vampires instantly blocked his path. Okay, Nick announced. Rules of this engagement. 1. The fight is between you and me, no one else. 2. It is to the death. 3. No weapons. Vampires appeared beside Sammi and swiftly stripped her of every blade and pistol. 4. The fight stays within this area, he added, gesturing to the ring of vampires encircling a clearing just large enough for combat. Fine, Sammi said, nodding. Oh, and one more rule, Nick continued with a pleased smirk. If your mate interferes, you automatically forfeit. You both die first, then the pack. He shrugged off his suit jacket and handed it to a nearby vampire, then rolled up his sleeves. Fine, Sammi repeated. She glanced back at Gabriello, whose face looked like he had just been shown the end of the world. Her eyes pleaded with him not to interfere. Okay, let's get this started, Nick said. Wait, Sammi interrupted. You've set all your conditions. I have 2 of my own. Nick considered for a moment, then nodded. First, I want the pack to witness the fight and 2 judges. 1 wolf, 1 vampire. Nick inclined his head. Your mate can summon them. As alpha, he will call the beta. Agreed, Sammi said. The second request is simple. If I lose and you kill me, respect the dead. Give the pack proper burials. I don't care what happens to my body, just treat them with dignity. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed Nick's face. You know, he said after a pause, because I'm beginning to like you, I'll agree. And I'll add a benefit of my own. When you die, you have my word your body will be respected and buried beside your mate in a marked grave. Sammi offered him a soft, genuine smile, one of quiet kindness. Nick's mouth parted slightly. For a long moment, he stared, caught off guard. He was used to hatred, cold glares, submission, never gentle warmth directed at him. Thank you, Sammi whispered. The moment passed. Nick shook himself, his battle-ready demeanor returning. Right, he said. Let's get this over with, shall we? Chapter 25. Sammi braced herself as Nick charged like a bull toward Red. She stepped to the side at the last instant, narrowly avoiding his tackle, then retreated several paces to open distance between them. Nick skidded to a halt, spun, and charged again, this time closing the gap so quickly she had no room to maneuver. His closed fist rocketed toward her jaw on the right. Sammi reacted instantly. She raised her right arm, elbow bent at 90 degrees, and braced it with her left hand. The punch stopped mere inches from her face. She shoved his arm aside, leaving him briefly open, but she did not strike. She stayed strictly defensive as he stepped back. Sammi! Gabriello shouted, struggling against the pack members who held him back from interfering. Nick unleashed a barrage of punches. Sammi dodged each one with practiced ease. He growled in frustration and feinted another punch, only to pivot and drive a powerful kick into her side. Sammi grunted as the impact hurled her to the ground. Pain stabbed through her ribs. She knew at least one had cracked or broken. She clenched her teeth, face twisted, and tried to push herself up. Weak, Nick taunted, planting his foot on her back and pressing down hard. I thought you might actually have some fight in you. But you're all bark and no bite. He chuckled softly. Pun intended. Piss off, Sammi hissed, the pressure on her broken rib sending fresh shocks of agony through her. Well, I suppose it was fun while it lasted, he said with a smirk. I'm going to enjoy disposing of your pack. His hand descended toward her head, fingers poised to snap her neck. Sammy's gaze drifted to Gabriello. His face was a storm of emotions, terror, grief, helplessness, his world on the verge of collapse. Sammi, he whispered. Nick's hands settled, one on her chin, the other at the back of her head. Goodbye, Sammi, he said, beginning to apply pressure. Sammi, Gabriello yelled. A fresh surge of courage and strength flooded through her. No, Sammi snarled. She twisted with the motion of his turn, using his own force against him. The pressure eased just enough for her to throw him off. Nick flew several feet away. You think I wasn't attacking because I was weak? Sammi asked, already rising. She rushed forward and drove a heavy punch into his right arm. Bone snapped under the blow. You think I'd let you break my rib because I can't defend myself? She followed with a hard kick to his right side, sending him rolling across the dirt. You think I'd let you nearly snap my neck because I was ready to die, she growled, advancing as he grunted and pushed himself up. Do you think I'd just give up when my pack's lives are on the line because of you? Sammi snarled, seizing his collar with every ounce of remaining strength and hauling him upright. You think I'd let you come anywhere near my mate? She spat, slamming several rapid punches into his face before hurling him to the ground again. While you were busy attacking, I was watching you, she continued. You favor your right side. So I broke your right arm and your right ribs first. She drove another kick into his side. Nick wheezed, blood spitting from his mouth. I see, he managed, chuckling through the pain. You may not be as stupid or weak as I first thought. Glad you've come to your senses, Sammi hissed. She moved to kick again, but Nick caught her foot and yanked. Sammi crashed onto her back, her head striking the ground hard. Her vision blacked out for a moment. When it returned, The world was blurred, and Gabriello's distant, desperate yells were the only clear sound. "And do you, Mutt, think you can kill me?" Nick growled. He straddled her, hands clamping around her throat, cutting off her air. Sammi clawed at his arms, trying to pry them away, but her strength ebbed quickly. Her strikes weakened to feeble taps. "Now die," he whispered. His fist smashed into her stomach, tearing through skin and muscle. Sammy's mouth flew open in agony as his cold hand moved inside her abdomen. "No!" Gabriello roared. Sammy's arms fell limp at her sides. Her eyes drifted closed. Her heartbeat slowed, then stopped. Silence fell over the clearing. Nick smirked and wrenched his hand free with a wet, ripping sound. "Take them all," he ordered his followers. The vampires moved to pin down any pack members who resisted. He turned to Gabriello with a mocking grin, wiping blood from his hand on a cloth. "Kill him," he said. 2 vampires advanced on Gabriello. He stared at Nick, watching the smirk slowly fade from the vampire's face. Pain twisted Nick's features. He grunted, groaned. His pale skin turned ashen gray. His glowing red eyes dulled to lifeless black and lost their shine. He buckled, dropping to his knees. Behind him stood Sammi. Unsteady, bloodied, but alive, holding Nick's heart in her right hand. "Never turn your back on your enemy," she growled. The heart fell to the ground with a dull thud. "He lost," she shouted to the stunned vampires. "You leeches will honor your master's pledge, leave now and never return." The vampires hesitated only a moment before fleeing, some snarling in anger as they vanished from the pack lands. "Sammi?" Gabriello whispered. She turned to him, a tired but genuine smile on her lips. Everyone stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe. "You're all safe now," she whispered. Then she collapsed. Gabriello's eyes widened. "Sammi!" He rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside her. Chapter 26. "Sammi!" Gabriello shouted as he rushed to her collapsed form and dropped to his knees. He scooped her up immediately, cradling her tightly against his chest. "Sammi? Sammi? Please, Sammi. Open your eyes, princess," he begged, his voice cracking. He caressed her cheek gently, willing her to respond. "Sammi," he called again, more urgent. Her eyelids fluttered slowly. She peeled them open, tired and heavy, and a faint smile curved her lips when she saw him. "Gab." "Hi," she murmured, barely above a whisper. Gabriello let out a soft, tear-choked chuckle. "Hi," he whispered back, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The pack of doctors arrived in a rush. Gregory hurried to her side, assessing her quickly. "Alpha, we have to get her inside so we can help her." "We can't do anything out here," Gregory said urgently. Gabriello nodded and stood, keeping Sammi secure in his arms. The group moved swiftly toward the house and into the infirmary wing. "Alpha, I'm sorry, but you have to stay here," Gregory told him as they transferred Sammi onto a gurney. "Please. I have to be with her," Gabriello pleaded. Gregory shook his head and placed steady hands on Gabriello's shoulders. "The best thing you can do for her right now is let us work. We'll tell you everything as soon as we're done." He glanced back at Johann, exchanged a quick nod, then hurried after the team wheeling Sammi away. Johann stepped forward and rested a hand on Gabriello's shoulder. "Gab," he asked quietly. It took only a second. Gabriello turned and pulled Johann into a tight embrace, burying his face in his friend's shoulder as soft sobs broke free. Johann held him without a word, simply offering silent strength as the hours dragged on. Eventually, Gabriello calmed enough to sit. The 2 men settled into the hard plastic chairs lining the wall several rooms away from Sammy's. The only sound in the corridor was the steady ticking of the clock on the bare cream wall, each second stretching the silence into something unbearable. The door to Sammy's room finally opened. Gregory stepped out. "Gregory? How is she?" Gabriello asked, rising instantly and moving toward him. Johann followed close behind. Gregory sighed and looked down. "We managed to stop the bleeding and stitch her up." Gabriello's heart sank at the tone. "But the injuries are too severe," Gregory continued, meeting Gabriello's watering eyes. She's dying. What? The word came out broken. Gabriello's gaze shifted to the closed door behind Gregory, as though it might open and prove the words false. Is there nothing we can do? Johann asked, voice thick with desperation. We tried everything. There's nothing left. She's awake right now, so I suggest you go in and say your goodbyes while you still can. Gregory placed a comforting hand on Gabriello's shoulder as he passed, then continued down the hall. Johann stepped toward the door. I'll only be a minute, he said quietly before slipping inside. Gabriello stood frozen. The realization that his remaining time with Sammi had been reduced to mere hours, if he was lucky, settled over him like ice. He felt nothing but a deep, hollow numbness. Gab? She's asking for you, Johann said softly as he emerged and approached. Gabriello drew in a shaky breath and walked to the doorway. He paused just outside, eyes fixed on the floor, listening to the steady beeps of machines that both confirmed she was still alive and kept her that way. He couldn't bring himself to look up. Gab. Her voice, soft, cracked, but unmistakably hers, pulled his gaze upward. She lay in the bed, pale and fragile. Her brown eyes had dulled, their usual spark fading. Her hair, pulled into a loose bun, looked lifeless. Yet she managed a small, gentle smile for him. Gabriello's eyes filled instantly. Sammi, he whispered. He crossed to her, took her hand in both of his, and sat on the edge of the bed. His thumb traced slow circles over her knuckles. Why did you do that? He asked, voice thick with pain. Why did you fight that leech? Sammi's smile softened. She lifted her free hand and laid it over his. Because I don't have long left. The pack does. They have families, friends. Something I never really had until I came back here. She gently guided his chin so he met her eyes. I would do it 100 times over if it meant you and the pack were safe. I can't lose you, Gabriello whispered. Sammi shook her head faintly. I'm sorry, Gabriello. They fell into a quiet, heavy silence. Gabriello let the tears fall freely, watching them drip onto their joined hands and the sheets. Gab, Sammi said after a moment, squeezing his hand weakly. I need you to keep my end of the deal with Nick. Make sure he's buried properly. I can't, Gabriello replied, voice raw. Not when he's the reason you're dying like this. Sammi sighed. Gabriello, I gave him my word. Don't make me break it. He exhaled slowly. Fine. I have one last request, she continued. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, finding his waiting gaze. I don't want to die here. In a hospital room. Gabriello nodded without hesitation. I know just the place. He began carefully disconnecting the monitors and tubes. Once she was free of them, he slid his arms beneath her and lifted her gently into a bridal carry. She nestled against his chest, soaking in his warmth. Where are we going? She asked in a soft sigh. It's a surprise, he whispered gently. One last surprise. Chapter 27. Gabriello carried Sammi out of the pack house and toward the forest, holding her close. He never once took his eyes from her face, not even to watch his path. Sammi rested her head gently against his chest, eyes closed, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat, so different from her own fading one. I'm sorry, princess, he whispered as they passed through the tree line and wove between the trunks. I'm fine, she murmured weakly. Gabriello quickened his pace. Just hold on, baby. We're almost there. Moments later, they broke through the dense trees and emerged onto the cliff. The sky blazed with the final colors of sunset, the last sunset Sammi would ever see. Gabriello walked to the very edge and carefully lowered himself to the ground, still cradling her in his arms. Look, he whispered. You remember this place. Sammi nodded faintly and opened her eyes. You brought me here, after our date, she breathed, her strength slipping away with each word. Gabriello smiled sadly and pulled her tighter against his trembling frame. It's beautiful, she whispered. Her eyes drifted closed for a few seconds before fluttering open again to watch the sun sink lower. Just like you, Gabriello murmured. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. He looked at the beautiful woman he had broken, now dying in his arms. Tears welled in his eyes as he felt her heartbeat slow beneath his palm. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I wish I could take it all back. Every wrong I ever did to you, I wish there was a way to undo it." Sammi lifted a weak hand and placed it gently on his right cheek. Gabriello looked down into her brown eyes, dull now, but still filled with kindness and love. The sight only made him cry harder. "Please don't cry," she whispered. "I want the last thing I see to be your smile." No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't force one. Sammi gave a soft, breathless chuckle and wiped away some of his tears with her thumb. "Gabriello," she breathed. Their eyes locked. "I love you, Gab. I may have tried to deny it, tried to act tough, but my heart has always belonged to you." Sammi, a small, broken smile finally touched his lips as love pushed through the grief in his eyes. "There it is," she whispered, tracing the curve of his smile with one finger. "That smile." "I love you too, baby," Gabriello choked out through his tears. "So much." "Gab," she whispered. Her eyes began to droop, then she forced them open again. "Yeah," he answered softly. "I forgive you," she said with a faint smile. She used what strength she had left to pull him down. Their lips met in a gentle, unhurried kiss, sweet, tender, full of everything they had never fully said. They savored each other, taking their time. Then Sammi's hand slipped from his cheek to rest on her chest. Gabriello felt her heartbeat stop. Her breathing ceased. He pulled back slowly and looked down at her still, peaceful face. "Sammi," he whispered. No response. "Sammi?" A little louder. Nothing. A raw sob tore from him. He pulled her up and buried his face in her shoulder as the last sliver of sun vanished below the horizon. He rocked her gently, tears soaking her shirt. Sammi was gone. He had killed his own mate with rejection. The worst sin a wolf could commit, the deepest pain anyone could suffer. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against her skin. "I love you so much." He kissed her lips once more, then held her close, staring at her pale, beautiful face. She looked almost asleep, as though she might wake at any moment. His tears fell onto her cheeks, making it seem as though she cried with him. The world had lost its color. "Alpha Gabriello." The familiar, aged voice made him lift his head. Grandfather stood a few paces away. He approached slowly and knelt on one knee beside them. "She died a brave death," he said wisely, fighting for those she held close in her heart. He placed a weathered hand on Sammi's forehead, closed his eyes, and waited a moment before opening them again. "Did you find a way to save her?" Gabriello asked, voice pleading, clinging to one last shred of hope. Grandfather shook his head gently. "I'm sorry, child. I cannot go against the laws of fate. No one can." He drew an eagle feather from inside his shirt. "But I can help her pass on with blessings." He began to chant softly, waving the feather over Sammi's body. A gentle wind rose, carrying the distant howl of a wolf and the sharp cry of an eagle. "There," Grandfather said quietly. "The spirits of the earth will guide her to the next life." He lifted the feather skyward in both hands, then lowered it slowly. "But I did find a way for your pack to live on with her presence," he continued. He ran his thumb gently from Sammi's forehead down the bridge of her nose. "It is an old blessing, passed from elder to elder." Gabriello continued to cry, eyes fixed on Sammi's face. "Her death won't be in vain, then. The pack will live on in peace and happiness." He brushed a strand of hair from her cold cheek and rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "I love you, Sammi." "I always will," he whispered. "We'll be together again." A grave was erected a few days later, and a funeral was held. A carved statue resembling Sammi stood as the pillar over her resting place, anchoring the blessing that would protect and sustain the pack. Her bike remained untouched in the garage. No one had the heart to move it. The memories it carried were too heavy. No one ever learned exactly what became of Ilona. Rumors said she found her mate and vanished soon after her confrontation with Sammi. Gabriello's parents eventually forgave their son. They had seen the depth of his regret. Their forgiveness came just after the funeral, and together with Johann, they stood by him through the long months of mourning. Alpha Gabriello visited her grave every day. On the anniversary of her death, he held a celebration of her life, open to all, regardless of rank or status. So everyone could remember the gift of living. In autumn, he laid white roses. In winter, red. In summer, lilies of the valley. In spring, he watched cherry blossoms drift around her stone, remembering the tattoo of blossoms and birds on her skin. The world moved on. Most of it remained oblivious to the quiet tragedy that had touched only a handful of lives. But even so, Luna's Sammi was missed.